As you may or may not know, I guess you do know, we are Schrödinger Hat, an open source community. Everything we do is revolved around open source in general. That means that our finances, our choices, our communities, our chats, our projects, and our events are open sourced in every single and possible way. And we are very proud of that. Of course, that requires some external helps from time to time. So as you can see on your seats, there is a small QR code. That's not a virus, or is it? We don't know. But it might be not. It's actually going to bring you, I guess, to one of our sponsorship pages where you can decide whether or not you feel that you want to financially help us organize these events. If you don't want to, no problem, because that's not an issue. Everything is open source, everything is open-minded, so feel free to help us or not help us financially. There are many ways to help. Financial means is just one of them. Otherwise, you can actively contribute to the community, actively contribute to open source projects that we have, bring your own open source projects inside the community, like we'll do. That's also a good opportunity to kind of participate and share knowledge with everyone participating, and also help us organize events. In fact, we are soon going to participate in organizing events in Milan as well. So if anyone is from Milan and they want to kind of help us set up base over there, please do come talk with us. We are looking for volunteers in that sense. It's an unpaid internship, of course, as any good job there is out there. But aside from that, do not sleep, Miško. Do not sleep. But aside from that, it's all good. Schrödinger Hat was born a few years ago. Now we are growing day by day. We are trying to build new projects, but most importantly, we're trying to build a community of developers, a community where everyone can feel safe and empowered, and where they can gather and find all the knowledge they want to without setting a price tag to it, which is very important because open source is meant to be open in all of its senses, right? So this is it. It's not open source day. That's been like 2 months ago or something, 3 months ago now, something like that. There's gonna be one next year. We're already preparing for that. So if you want to volunteer, please do come talk with us. This is Schrodinger Sessions. It's the first one of our meetings in this sense. It's halfway between a meetup and a workshop. This is definitely more of a workshop. We're going to talk about Qwik with our good friends Miško Hevery and Giorgio Boa, which allowed us to have this beautiful workshop here in Florence at Nana Bianca. And yeah, this is the presentation for Schrödinger Hat. We have an active call for paper for Schrödinger Sessions, so events like this one. For now, we are in Florence, but we will soon have some of them in Verona, in Milan, hopefully very soon, possibly in Paris and Brussels as well. So if you want to feel international, that's also a good chance to do that. And yes, so this is the QR code. You can take a picture of it. You can scan it right now. It will lead you to a GitHub project where we are effectively gathering all papers from people that want to participate and hold a Schrödinger session. So feel free to. Any level, beginner, intermediate, expert, code, no code, low code, high code, whatever code, quit code, you can just send the paper. It's good. We would like to thank our beautiful, incredible sponsors that are helping us and helping us manage the costs that we have to organize these events completely for free for our participants, which is kind of our selling point in this case, because everything has to be free, but there's got to be money somewhere. So without them, it wouldn't be possible at all. So let us thank Dato CMS, an incredible CMS, by the way. We've tried it personally. It was incredible. And I've known international companies that are using Dato CMS, and they've all talked really good about it. So you should try it. They have a really nice free tier. And Lavoro Digitale Italia, an HR firm. And if you're looking to find a new job, a new position, or a new opportunity, that's definitely someone to look out for. They are very helpful, very kind, and they have lots of open opportunities as well. And then our last thank and special thank to our host and supporter, Nana Bianca, which is the space where we are here right now. If you've been to Open Source Day a few months ago, you remember we were in the other room over there, a little bit bigger, of course, but more people. But in general, they are really helpful, allowing us to host these events here, allowing us to effectively not spend thousands and thousands of euros on the venue, which is very, very helpful, trust me. So without further ado, let me add that we also have digital certificates, as you might, for this day and for other sessions in the future. As you might imagine, this is on blockchain, of course. So everything is very official and very much immutable in its state, just as we love it to be. And so at some point in the next few days, you will receive an email to kind of join the chain and redeem your certificate of participation. And it's a digital NFT, so you can sell your participation to Qwik, and Miško will buy all of them for real money. He said so. Yes. This one you saw already. It's the Wi-Fi. If you need it, you will probably need it. Just, use it. And yeah, I would say without further ado, we almost reached 10 a.m. I would say, yeah, there is another slide. Is it a photo of me? Yeah, it was. Okay. Yeah, this is a QR code to some place that I know. LinkedIn. Okay, so follow us on LinkedIn. Very important. Linktree. It's another. There is probably a LinkedIn link in Linktree, but just click on it and follow us. It's very important. It allows us to invite you, and you can also participate actively in our newsletter if you check-marked the newsletter participation, which I guess we had on Eventbrite. So yeah, last slide. That was it? No. Good? Yeah. Okay, so that's it. Thank you. Great.
Good morning. Hello. Wow, so many people. It's amazing. So many people. It's I feel honored. Oh yeah, over here. So we're gonna talk about AngularJS today, right? Yes. And Ionic. All right, so I feel very honored that you guys are all here today and that you came and listened to us talk and talk about our passion. This is lovely Giorgio.
Hi everyone.
Ciao. Giorgio is amazing. He's one of our open source contributors and he is killing it. Is the mic not working for you?
Yeah, it's working. It's working.
All right. You gotta have the banter, you have to chit chat. I like to start each presentation with a dad joke. You know dad jokes? Anyways, how do functions break up? They stop calling each other. No? Okay. Okay, so I absolutely love questions. So stop me at any point. If something's not clear, ask away. Let's make this more like a social event rather than just me talking for how many hours it is, or us talking, me and Giorgio talking. So ask away and interrupt and let's have fun. All right, so let's get started. So let's create a new Qwik project. npm create Qwik at latest. That's the magical incantation. And we're going to choose a directory. It's going to be Qwik. I don't think I'm going to be able to spell Schrödinger. Schrödinger. Okay. And let's take an empty app, just kind of so we can start from the beginning. And yes, let's install dependencies, make a repo.
Yeah, so basically here we are using the CLI and the core team develop this CLI. It's amazing, and we have few starters, and basically we choose the basic one, without anything.
Let's make the font bigger. How's this font? Can people see?
Yeah, I think.
Is my head like blocking part of the screen?
No.
No? Okay. Giorgio, do you have other jokes?
Difficult question. No, nothing
Okay.
to say.
So if you start npm run dev, then we should get ourselves here, but let's open this up in incognito and inspect, make this bigger, make this side bigger. Okay, so at this point, you should have created a basic hello world from Qwik, right? And so before we jump into actually building an application, let's talk about maybe some of the coolness of Qwik. Oh, by the way, there is a link that you should follow that's important too. So if we go to GitHub, let's go to GitHub Hevery. So Hevery, that's me. And if we go to workshop, well, Qwik workshop right here. And then in here is a lesson, and here is the lesson of what we're going to talk about today. So this is the URL to kind of see. I don't know how to make it big enough, but it's just, I would go to GitHub, Hevery, and then Qwik-workshop, and from there just navigate to the lesson. And so you can follow along what we're going to do. And what's nice about these lessons is if we go, for example, to lesson 1, you can see the start and end. This is where we started, this is where we ended, and this is what we're going to do for this particular lesson. So you can look at the diff, and you can see all the code that we're going to write. So you can follow along. And of course, if I get ahead of you, you can just go there and you can just check out a particular version, and you can follow along that way. Okay? Any questions so far? Come on, I love questions. I feel like you don't love me. All right, let's make a new file. Okay, so I'm going to make a new file inside of the routes folder called demo/index.tsx. And so the demo folder, the name of the folder is going to be the name of the route. And so in here, we're just going to create a component. And you should also have, if you're using VS Code, it should automatically just complete things for you. All right. So if we just make a new component in a demo folder, then we can go into /demo, and you can see that we render whatever is there. And then if we go and add more exclamation points, then you can see that it automatically updates, right? And so if you go to the network tab, we are using dev mode. And so in a dev mode, there is a Vite. How many people know about Vite? Yeah, okay. So Vite is the thing that does hot module reloading, and it's only available in dev mode. In production, Vite disappears. So I'm going to say /Vite.
Yeah, I'm going to show you the lessons.
The lessons, okay. Before we do lesson 1, though, I want to kind of do a quick demo.
Yeah.
Quick demo. It doesn't get old. Okay. So what I wanted to show you is that, look, for this particular page, the system didn't even download any JavaScript because, well, there's nothing interactive here, so why send any JavaScript? And the key thing about Qwik is that Qwik is really good about not sending JavaScript across. So let me just create something. So the way we create, well, let's just create a counter. So let's do const count equals use signal 1, 2, 3, and count that value. And now it says, here's your count 1, 2, 3. Still no JavaScript. So let's create a button here. Oops, click. Okay, so now we have JavaScript, and now we can go and interact with the page. Wait, why does it not increment thing? Oh, because I have to do ++, haha. Okay, now notice that it works, but let me refresh this. Notice the interesting thing. Still no JavaScript, and it's only when you go and hit +1 does the JavaScript show up. And so this is kind of the core difference of Qwik, right? All other frameworks, eagerly download and execute all of the JavaScript for your application, whereas Qwik is very lazy. But let's even look further and see what exactly are we doing. So if you click on this file, you notice that the only piece of code that it downloaded is really the count value plus plus, and then whatever this lexical scope thing is. I'll explain that later. And so if you go back to your source code, notice this is the piece of code that got extracted. Here, let's make this more obvious. Let's do it like this. And let's do console.log, click. So the piece of code that downloaded, whoops, is really just the click and the incrementation, right? Now, this should be strange because how did the framework extract this, right? This click listener right here is buried deep inside of the JSX. And the only way to get a hold of it is to first download the component and then execute the component, and from the JSX output, you can get hold of the click listener that you see over here. And yet the framework somehow extracted this piece of code because it said like, this is the only code that you don't need anything else. And then, it downloaded the framework. This is the framework itself. And then there's this build thing, which is kind of irrelevant. It disappears at a build time. But nothing else showed up. More specifically, what didn't show up is the rest of the component, right? And so what the $ over here means is that you take this piece of code right here, and you create some kind of an export const, count, click equals something like this, right? And so now that it's a top-level export, and I can't spell, now that it's a top-level export, you can get a hold of it, right? So the $ here means to convert this piece of code into this piece of code. Except we have a problem here. This count no longer exists, right? Because this closure here captures the value count, but if you refactor it for a top-level thing, it doesn't work. And that's why we have this bit here, this piece of code right here, right? This piece of code right here, oops, what did I do? This piece of code here restores the count. And so now we have lexical scope being restored. Now, you as a developer don't have to worry about any of this stuff, right? It just happens automatically. I just want to kind of show the magic under the hood of what's happening. So every time you see a $, it means that that piece of code should get extracted and should maybe lazy loaded or lazy executed inside of the application. And so, as you can see, there is no JavaScript until hit +1, and then the code shows up. Now, at this point, you might be thinking like, well, that's nice, but wouldn't that mean that in the real world, if I want to click on a button, I have to wait for the server to respond, and like now there's a network latency, and now my application is kind of slow, right? And so in this mode, it would absolutely mean that, but that's not actually what happens in production. So let's go to a production website, and let me open up a inspect. And inside of let's go to application. And notice that this cache storage here is currently empty. And as soon as I navigate to a website that has it, notice the cache storage got filled in with all of the relevant pieces of code. So in production mode, when you actually make a production build, you get a service worker, which is right here. And this service worker, it's right here, service worker. This service worker's job is to download all of the relevant bits of information, paying for the latency. So when you first navigate to the page, the application loads, and then you can go into the tunnel, it doesn't matter, and the application still works and executes because the cache will be returning it, right? So the number one concern people have with this strategy is that you have to wait for the network, and I just kind of showed you, you don't have to wait for the network. And so now you're going to ask the question of like, well, if you just download everything, how is it different than existing application, right? Like that they also download everything. Well, there's a couple of differences. First of all, here is a simple application here, right? And notice the thing we downloaded the interaction, but what we didn't download was this component right here. Like the whole component didn't get downloaded except for the listener, right? So Qwik is really good at identifying the components that never have to make it to the client. And so while, that's not what I wanted. This is what I wanted. While we do eagerly download a whole bunch of code, that is not a complete application. That is a small fraction of the overall application because many of the components just never make it to the client. And so as a result, like, yes, we have to eagerly download code, but we download much, much smaller fraction than a normal application would. And more importantly, that code that we put in the cache doesn't ever, probably won't make it into the JavaScript VM, right? We do lazy loading into the JavaScript VM, but eager loading into the browser cache. Which is, you know, it's kind of a new vocabulary. Like, it's a muscle that you don't usually have because in normal frameworks, you don't differentiate between lazy loading into the cache and lazy loading into the browser virtual machine because it's the same thing. But here, it's kind of broken up into two parts. You know, getting code to the browser is one concern, and getting code from the browser into the actual JavaScript VM, that's a separate concern. Okay, the other thing I want to show you is that inside of here, we actually, it looks like we only wrote a single component, but remember, we're actually inside of Qwik City, which is a meta framework, and notice that every time you see a QV over here, actually, that's a separate component. So on this page, and I can show you this, we can go to layout, for example, we have this component above us, we also have root TSX, which can I, okay, which, you know, has a Qwik City provider, there's a router head, router outlet, right? There's a whole bunch of components on this page that we didn't, you know, that was kind of auto-generated, but notice none of them actually make it to the client. So Qwik City is pretty good, I mean, Qwik is really good about like, yeah, I know you have a whole bunch of components, but you don't actually need them on a client, and so we won't send them across. So that's a kind of a quick demo. And one more thing I wanted to kind of point out is that let's make another button here. And here, greet. And let's do onClick. Console log hello. Okay. So now we have a console log hello. So now if I click greet, notice the only code that makes it there is literally the console log, nothing else. And then when I interact with +1, now more code makes it here. And notice that the first piece of code didn't even need a framework, right? So the greet doesn't need a framework, so we don't even download it. Whereas the +1 does need the framework because we have to go and update the thing, right? And so the system is really good about just not doing unnecessary work. Questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, I have a question, yeah.
So basically,
thank you, man. Like, you are, you know, without you here, I would be so boring. But like, I appreciate questions. Go for it.
We don't have a listener because we don't do this kind of iteration because it's a new mental model. So how the framework knows which file download when I click on the button, for example?
It's a good question. It's like staged or something.
Okay.
Okay, so let's look at the greet over here. Notice, as a developer, all I did was write onClick greet. By the way, how many React folks are in here? Okay, so this code, you look at this and you go like, I know exactly what's going on, right? And this is intentional. Okay, so notice what happens here with the button. We have a special attribute on::click, and this special attribute basically gives you a URL to download and a symbol that has to be executed, right? So this URL says demo component div button onClick. So if I go click it, notice go to the network tab. Notice this is what we downloaded, right? So if you go to headers, we downloaded demo component div, etc. And inside of this file, notice the export. The export is demo component div button onClick. And so if I go back to here, then you see that the second part of it is the symbol that's being exported, right? So this is what we call QRL. And you know, it's like a URL, but for Qwik. So it's a Qwik URL. It's funny, I know. So QRL gives you actually 3 pieces of information. One is the name of the chunk to download, right? So this is basically the URL part. The symbol that needs to be executed inside of the chunk, because you know the chunk can have multiple things inside of it. And so this is the symbol that's in here. And sometimes, in this case we don't have anything, but if you go a step above, notice it says 0. And this 0, basically in the case of the click, says, how do I recover count, right? Because in order to make this work, when you call the function that says count value plus plus, the function needs to know, well, what's the current count? Like, what am I incrementing from? Somehow, this function needs to get hold of 1, 2, 3, right? Because without this information, like, how is the count supposed to do anything? And so that information is encoded in here, inside of the 0. And that 0 is basically a pointer into the Qwik JSON. By the way, you don't need to know any of this stuff. This is an implementation detail, but I'm just kind of showing you so that you have an understanding. So don't feel like you have to understand this craziness. So this 0 is a pointer into this objects array. And this objects array, the 0th item in here, says that we have something called 0012. And if you kind of dig through our code, you realize 0012 means it's a signal. So this is a signal that is pointing, the last digit over here is 1, so it's pointing to this location, 1, 2, 3. And that's how the system knows, like, oh, what you want is a signal that contains 1, 2, 3, right? And so this is how you recover the signal associated with it. And the signals also have subscriptions. So when we ran the code on a server, we executed this count.value, and this count.value basically attaches the signal to the DOM element, meaning that if you change the count value, you have to also update the DOM location, right? And so that's encoded in here inside of the subscriptions, and this basically says, oh, if you change the count value, you're going to have to go and find element number 7 and do something with it. And so let's find element number 7. And notice over here, there is a comment that says this is element number 7. In other words, it's saying, if you hit +1, you need to go increment this value, right? And what's interesting though is that to do this, we don't actually need the component, right? The component executed on a server. So let's make this even more clear. Console.log render counter, right? So on a server, the server said render the count, but there is no, let's see, escape. Okay, we don't see the word render in the client. And again, those of you who are from React are kind of confused now because it's like, wait. How did hydration happen, right? Where is that code? I would expect that code to execute. There is no hydration. And then if I hit +1, you would be like, hey, I expect the render counter to execute. Notice, none of them is here. It says click, but not the thing. So not only does it not execute, right? This code never even makes it to the client. So even if the client wanted to execute it, it couldn't because it just doesn't ever make it there. Okay, make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, if we inspect the view source of the page, we can see the raw HTML and CSS and 1 kilobyte of JavaScript that is doing the magic of executing stuff.
Oh yeah, we never talked about that. Oh, let me just comment this out. So there is a piece of JavaScript. Sorry, we didn't talk about that, but we should. There's a thing called Quick Loader. This thing is about 1 kilobyte, and it executes in about 1 millisecond on desktop and maybe 10 milliseconds on a mobile device. So really, really cheap. And this is the thing that knows how to basically can think of it as a polyfill for the on-click attributes. So we are teaching browser how to deal with on-click attributes through this polyfill. Okay, I want to show you one more demo, and then we're going to jump into actually building something fun. Okay, so let's build a clock.
This is your best.
This is my favorite demo.
Favorite one.
Okay, const time equals use signal, and we're just going to say loading, and then we're going to say time.value. Okay, so obviously this is just going to say loading, right? Nothing really exciting here. And so in React, you have these things called effects. We have these things called task. There's a special kinds of task. We're going to get into this later. But so let's create a const update equals, what is the update? Update is time.value dot equals new. Sure, that sounds good. We're going to call update, set interval. Okay. Not to mention that setting interval like this in React is a problem. You can't do that and I'm sure the people who are from React know this thing, but let's not go in there. So now we have a counter that goes and updates every second. And if you look at the network tab, you realize, well, this code obviously had to download eagerly, and so this code just shows up eagerly because, well, how else would you do it, right? So, but let's look at something else. Let's create a style. And in this style, we're going to say height is 100 VH. Okay, now the clock is below the fold. But notice, no JavaScript. The system was like, yeah, I know you want the clock, but it's not visible, so I'm not going to bother. Let's scroll the clock into the view. The JavaScript shows up. Isn't that nice? Now, do that in your favorite framework. All right. But I'm going to show you something even crazier. Okay, let's look at this. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said that at the beginning. Yes, question. I love it. Extra point for you.
Use signal is like use state of React, but without the use of array of getting and setting an element.
Mm-hmm.
Because I see only one constant and not an array of two constants.
That's right.
So we simply update the time for setting it, and then we simply use time for getting it.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about signals. So signals are kind of a crazy thing. Once you understand them, you immediately fall in love with them, right? So yes, you would do this for declaring a state, and so the equivalent thing would be set state in React, right? And you would get two values. You would get the time and set time. And set time is how you would tell the system that you want to re-render, right? So in here, the way you tell the system you want to re-render is you simply make an assignment, right? So the getter and so this object has a getter and a setter, and so calling a setter is causing it to essentially re-render. Now, but here is where it gets different. When you tell the React that you need to re-render, React's like, great, I'm going to re-render. But the React has no idea what you did with the count. And so as a result, it just says, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to recompute absolutely everything, right? The thing here, and let's go to the counter, that's easier to follow. The thing that the counter does in here is you read the value over here. And it's the act of reading that makes a subscription. And so because you read the value here, the framework now knows that, like, oh, every time I go and change the value on the count, I have to re-render this component. Except there's this tricky optimization, which is that in the world of React, when you re-render, the minimal amount of work is always a component. You can't do less than that, right? But here we have a special optimization, and that is we see if we have to attach a component to this particular thing, or should we attach a DOM element directly. And in this particular case, the system's like, I can just attach the DOM element directly, and so the component never ever has to make it to the client, right? So if I go and if I do +1, right, the listener shows up, the framework shows up, but the component doesn't. But let me show you how the component could show up. Let's do console log render count. Let's print count like this. Okay. Now we're saying that, hey, we want to not count that value. Sorry, we want to print the value, and so now it says count 1, 2, 3, right? But what we have done is we have caused the read to happen. So now notice what happens on the client. When I hit +1, not only did I have the listener show up and the framework and the build, but now the component shows up because you said you wanted to render the count. And so now if you go to the output, you now see that the counter is actually re-rendering because you caused a subscription to happen by reading the value, right? So by reading this value right here is what causes the closest outer function, which in this case is the component, to rerun, unless we can attach it to the DOM element. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay. Yes, another question. Yeah.
Wait. Chiedi prima. Who was the first? So they hear us from home.
Hi. So would it be correct to say that these signals are like RxJS observable with out of subscriptions?
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite topic. Okay, so if you talk to the RxJS folks, they're like, oh, this is like behavioral subject. I know this. Why didn't you just use behavioral subject? And there are sufficient number of differences where the details matter. And so the fundamental problem with, or the fundamental difference with observables is that observables, one, have an explicit subscription and then unsubscription. But more importantly, observables are values delivered to you over time. Whereas signals are synchronous. It's the current value. When I say count that value, I'm not saying like, give me updates over time. I'm just saying like, give me the current value. And so while at the first glance, the two may look very similar, once you start using them, you kind of realize like, oh, the fact that I don't have to deal with subscriptions and subscriptions, and the fact that the values are synchronous rather than delivered asynchronously, that makes all the difference in how enjoyable it is to work with. RxJS is super complicated to explain. There are people who make full-day courses just explaining how RxJS works. Signals can be essentially explained in 5 minutes, in that like the act of reading is what causes the closest function to re-execute, right? So the fact that I've read this value is what's causing this function to re-execute whenever the value has changed. It's that simple.
So the framework doesn't have to do anything when the component unmounts, or when it...
So the framework keeps track of the subscriptions. I know the word subscriptions here is overloaded here. But the framework cleans up after itself. The interesting thing about observables is that every time you rerun a function that the observable kind of triggered, you clear all the previous subscriptions and you let the function create new ones, which means they can change over time. You can say like, oh, when it runs the first time, I care about these things, but when I run the second time, now I care about this other set of things. And stuff like this, while it is theoretically possible to do in RxJS, is so complicated that almost nobody does it. So in practice, RxJS has a single static graph of dependencies, whereas with signals, the dependencies can change over time. The signals are the new hotness in the frameworks, in case you haven't noticed.
There was another question in the room. Who was it? There you go.
And is it going to, when it re-renders, is it going to re-render all the children?
Yeah, that's another good question. No, it does not cause all the children to render. So let's notice when I hit +1, it downloaded the +1, and it did not cause the clock to re-render. So Qwik is extremely surgical about what it does, and the signals are a prerequisite. If you don't have signals, and the count changes, then the framework cannot reason. The framework doesn't know. What if the signal was passed into the children? I don't know. I need to be careful and I need to execute the children. And so with signals, the nice thing is that the framework now knows like, oh, nobody read the value of the count as a child, and therefore I know I don't have to re-render it, right? So the Qwik is really, the word that we like to use is surgical. In other words, if it doesn't have to do it, it will not do it. So your mental model should always be like, no, then Qwik will not do it. Okay.
Oh, wait, we have another question from home at this time. Benjamin is asking, so destructuring the return statement, the return of use signal is not a good idea, right?
Yes and no. So destructuring it, yes. So you cannot, well, actually I don't know what's going to happen, because destructuring is a common pattern, and we have this thing called an optimizer that looks for the $ and breaks things down and also converts to JSX, and among other things, it looks for destructuring patterns and tries to fix them so that it's okay. So let's actually try to see what happens. So if I do value equals, const value equals count, right? So I have destructured the value, and I go and delete this here. You would think that the whole thing would subscribe, right? Let's see what happens. Nope, it was smart enough to recognize that it doesn't need to do that. And even though you destructured it, it still correctly did the right thing. What I mean by right thing is, even though it looks like you're doing a read over here, which is equivalent to the console log, right? It doesn't behave as console log here. Here, if I show the value here, now it has to go and download the component because I need to run the console log, right? To print everything out. But by not doing this, now the component doesn't download. So in frameworks like Solid, destructuring is a bad idea because you cause oversubscription. Qwik is usually pretty good about like noticing it and doing the right thing anyways. Okay, let me back up a second. What are the rules about signals? So the act of reading is what creates a subscription. And therefore, you shouldn't read the signal until the last possible moment, right? So the strategy is, don't do a read until you absolutely have to. Okay? And destructuring is a way of basically doing an early read. And so in general, that's kind of says don't do that. But because it's such a common pattern, the optimizer knows how to look for it basically, and it undoes the destructuring. So you can write nice simple code, but the optimizer does the correct thing for you. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. And one last question. It looks like we are mutating state inside the component. Is it happening behind the hood? Are we actually mutating
yes,
state?
a signal is a state, and it is syntactically this looks different from use state in React, but fundamentally when you call set state in React, you're also mutating the underlying value in React, right? So in that sense, it's the same thing.
Okay, great.
Because when you destructuring under the hood is going.
Oh yeah. Let me show you this actually. Here, I can show it. I can. Here. So let me see. Here is the demo. Okay, so we destructured, right? Like before the console log, we done a destructuring piece of line over here, right? Notice what actually happened. It inlined the destructuring for us. So it says, aha, you will do count that value, right? The destructuring bit disappeared from our code base. So it undid it, basically. It undid it here, and it also undid it in this location right here. Right, because it's passing count instead of the value, yeah. So the framework, the optimizer basically undoes that work. Okay, I want to show you one more thing, and then we're going to start building our code. So let's pull this out to a get current time is, and async for now. Okay, so all I did is I wrapped the current time into a function, right? So the application still works as you would expect. There's still count happening. No, it's not happening. Why is it not happening? Oh, that's happening. I just didn't see it, I guess. Oh, is my face? Oh, okay, sorry. So there's a counter that's happening over here. Sorry, that's kind of hard to see. Okay, so the counter is happening over here, and I just wrapped this inside of a function. So in that sense, I haven't done anything yet, right? Watch this trick. Why are you not happy? In async functions. Oh, because... Oh, this thing, async. No, I put the async in the wrong location. I have to import it. Okay, so actually, let's make this even more obvious. Okay, right? Check this out. No get current time in the client. You go navigate here. The code executes. The clock is updating, but guess where the get current time is being updated? On a server. You guys should be impressed. This is crazy, right? Thank you. So the superpower of Qwik is that these dollar functions, you can do crazy things. Like, for example, you can pin a function permanently to a server. And now this piece of code right here is happening on a server. Actually, let's do it like this.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can we pass only variables, or we can pass?
Oh yeah, we can do even something crazier. How about we show the date and then we dereference the date on the client? So it still works. And notice the different color means that this is the date, right? So the server is printing the actual date object, but the client is then localizing it using the toLocal string. So that's pretty cool, right? That you can do kind of stuff like that. Okay, so that's the overview of Qwik, and so maybe we should actually build some real application. Yes, Giorgio, what's up?
How the client call the server?
Oh, how did the client call the server? That is a good question. So let's click over to fetch XHR, and you can see that the client is calling the server every so often, and the payload is basically, it just gives it the name of the function it wants to run on a server, right? So the same QRL now exists on a server as well. And the server then responds with a serialized version of the date, right? So it's this 006 is a special code that basically says what follows is actually a date. And so it deserializes as a date. And the result is that, it executes on a server like this. Thank you.
And what about the URL? Is localhost slash something?
Oh, the URL of this, yes. So let's see if I go here.
The headers.
In the headers, you can see this localhost,
Okay, so
That's literally what it is. You got an RPC out of the box without anything. Now, the nice thing about this particular thing, though, is that if I hover over things, notice it correctly flows the time information. It knows that it's a function that returns a date, right? And so if I if I cast this to as string, right? Notice how immediately it's like, wait a minute, this is a string. Like you're telling me this is a string and you're trying to call toLocal times, that doesn't exist on a string, right? So it is type safe out of the box.
and can I move the function in another place?
Oh yeah, good point. How about we take this function?
Because here we are mix and match server stuff with the
Yeah,
client
let's
stuff.
take this function here and just move it to a top level function like this. And yeah, it still works. We still have the clock and the updates are still happening. So you can move the function wherever you want. It doesn't have to be here. And of course, the function is on a server, and so it can access server things.
Where would you host a project like this?
Oh, you can host
Repeat
this.
for home. Where would you host a Qwik project?
Yeah.
And does it work on Vercel?
Docs. Okay, you know what? Let's get rid of this.
Any other questions
deployments.
meanwhile?
So we can host on Azure Cloud for Dino. This is short. Vercel isn't here. This list is short. It's missing something. No, this is missing AWS.
AWS is a new one, new implementation.
Here. So Azure Cloud for Dino, Cloud, Netlify, Node.js, and AWS.
Fastify as well.
Fastify is in the list as well. So you can basically host it in standard places that you would expect to host these things.
And we can do static site generation as well.
Yeah, so you can also use Apache if you insist. You can make a blog, yes. Okay, so this is kind of an overview of Qwik and how Qwik is fundamentally different than a framework that you might be using up until now, right? So the whole point of Qwik is to make the source code look extremely familiar. As a developer, the code I write is essentially the same exact code that I've been used to writing, especially for React developers. They look at this stuff and they're like, this is the exact same thing. But the thing is, what's different is not how you write the code, but what actually happens underneath. And this is actually a problem for us because a lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, it looks like React, and I already have React, and I don't need Qwik. It's like, yeah, but you missed the amazing bits, right? The amazing bits is not the syntax. The syntax is what you're kind of used to knowing. It's what's happening underneath. And that underneath part is really the magic that I think it's completely unique. Like, I don't think there is any other framework that does anything remotely similar.
Okay, it's too good to be true, but is there any specific application that you want to recommend Qwik?
Okay, so Qwik is a general purpose framework, right? So whatever you can build in your React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, standard frameworks, you can also build in Qwik. There isn't really any sort of differences. Like, for example, if you're building a game, React, Angular, Svelte, and whatever are probably not the best things for building a game. And in that sense, Qwik probably wouldn't be the best thing for that either, right? But anything that the other frameworks would be good for, Qwik is also good for that as well. So it's really the same exact category. It is not a subset of things. So for example, Astro is a bit of a subset, right? If you wanted to build a full-on application, Astro is probably not the choice. If you want to build a blog site, Astro would be perfect, right? So whereas with Qwik, there is no kind of, basically it's the same as any other framework. Whatever you can build over there, you can build here. And then the question might be like, well, what's the downside, right?
No, another
Okay.
opinion is that if you have a big application, you pay only for the kilobyte of JavaScript.
Yes.
If you have a small or big, it doesn't matter, because the only startup payload is HTML, CSS, and that kilobyte of JavaScript for every kind of application.
Yeah, I would say that the more complicated the website becomes, the more of a benefit you will see. Actually, we have a complicated website. So we have Qwik Builder, sorry, not Qwik Builder. We have Builder.io. This is our homepage. And we can have the same exact thing in Next.js. Right? So these two pages are essentially identical. Why is the menu up? Okay. These are identical pages. One is in Qwik and one is in Next.js. And I want to show you kind of the difference that you can expect. Performance. So first is the Qwik. Give it a few seconds. And now we do the same exact thing. And we do it performance. So one thing we can look at is the amount of JavaScript. Okay, so it's 820 kilobytes of JavaScript for this page versus network JavaScript versus, where's the JavaScript? It should be, that refresh. Why does the JavaScript not? No, the V doesn't matter. That's fine. Where's the JavaScript? Oh, the framework now wakes up. Okay, so here's the JavaScript, and the JavaScript here is 51 kilobytes. That's a big difference, okay? So that's the first difference that you need to see over here. And now the performance, okay, so here's the performance now. So Qwik took 53 milliseconds to get the page ready, versus Next.js took 300 almost, 250 milliseconds, right? Huge difference. And so let me just show this to you in the first second of the website. So this is the first second of the website right here. And can I scroll this? Okay, so notice all the busyness in terms of JavaScript that basically execute. This is hydration in action for Next.js. Let's look at the same exact thing for Qwik.js, the first second of the life of the website. First second. Okay. Oops. Notice the JavaScript here. There's lots of small things going on, but there's nothing big here versus this humongous thing that happens here. This is hydration that's happening here, no hydration here, right? So this is the difference basically between Qwik and existing frameworks. And the thing is, this is Next.js, but you would get a very, very similar result if you used Angular, Vue, Svelte, Solid, or any other framework that's out there. Because all of them fundamentally need to execute code, need to run hydration in order to make the page interactive. And we can maybe even do this. And so the end result of this is page speed, builder.io. The end result is, oops, page speed, render equals. Okay, the end result of this is that Qwik website will be pretty close to 100. You know Lightspeed scores and Core Web Vitals? Okay, so here we go, pretty close to 100, whereas Next.js will be like 40 or something. Come on. While it's loading. It will be about 40, but here we go, 42. Same exact website, no difference, right? And of course, people will tell you like, oh, you need to optimize. And then you look into it and you're like, okay, well, I'm supposed to optimize something, and it says reduce the unused JavaScript. Like, what exactly am I supposed to do here? Like, as a framework, you forced hydration upon me, you downloaded all the code, you executed all the code, and of course, the unused listeners, those are the click listeners. Like, of course, nobody has interacted it, but you downloaded it. And so there's very little I can do as a developer to kind of influence this thing. Whereas here, I didn't do anything as a developer. I didn't even think about this problem. And you get the this behavior out of the box, which is that, Qwik downloads, how much was it? Was 50 kilobytes versus the Next.js downloads 820 kilobytes. Yes?
With microphone, sorry.
What are the performance for a PVA if I wanted to create one with this framework?
Sorry, if you wanted to want what?
PVA application.
Oh, PWA. So
sorry.
similar kind of similar responses, right? You see how Qwik just downloads, Qwik executes less code. And because you execute less code, you don't have to download that code. And also Qwik does everything, Qwik can you don't have to think about lazy loading in Qwik. It's just a property of Qwik that naturally is in the system. And it's the thing that basically allows Qwik now to download and execute certain pieces of code. And so out of the box, you just kind of get this. And this behavior will also extend to a PWA or anything like that. The only thing with PWA is you have to tell the service worker to prefetch all the code, right? Currently, the service worker only prefetches what is kind of reachable from the current state of the app. In the case of a PWA, you basically have to say like anything in the app needs to be able to be prefetched.
Any other questions? Yes, okay.
Are there coding conventions for Qwik?
Oh, yeah, it's a good question. Are there coding conventions? We haven't made any coding conventions yet. I'm kind of hoping the community will step up and come up with something. Or you could just use coding conventions from like the other frameworks. Like probably, I mean, it's not identical, but like React might be a good starting point.
You are looking actively for contributors,
yeah, I would
right?
love
Yeah,
for somebody to
starting
come up
point.
with a coding convention here.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the service workers.
Yeah.
So, so you have some bundles that you can prefetch and some others that are cached with runtime strategies, I guess. Could you configure these strategies for different bundles, for different assets like images,
Yes,
CSS?
yes, you can do all of that. Actually, it's super easy. The way you do it is you literally just dispatch a custom event, Q prefetch event, and then in there you just list a set of bundles or symbols that you want. And so it's trivial to basically say like, oh, also grab these other things.
How do you know the bundles? These are like hashes generated by the framework?
These are hashes, yeah. So when you make a build, there's something called Q manifest, which contains all this information.
Okay.
Also, what we want to do is as the application is being used, we want to collect all the symbols and then basically use that information to influence the bundles for the next build. So basically the framework would learn from how the users are actually using it, and that's going to influence how the bundling is going to happen for the next release of the application.
Ah, cool.
Which is kind of like, I don't know, AI, right?
Yeah, there is this library called Guest.js that does something similar.
Guest.js does it on a route level. This does
yeah.
it on basically on a dollar level. Every time you see a dollar, right, is when you can make that possible decision.
Where would you get this data from? Analytics or?
So we're working on this right now, but just like you dispatch queue prefetch, there's a queue symbol that's being dispatched on each request, and this basically tells you where things are. Actually, is this running here? No, this is Qwik. I can show a demo of that later. I don't want to get distracted right now. We should probably go with.
I have a
workshop.
question as well. Are there any more? No. Okay, my question.
Okay, so we took a big detour of how Qwik is amazing, because Qwik is amazing. But let's go and do the next lesson. Oh yeah, I closed this thing. I wasn't supposed to close this. Hevery Qwik workshop.
A quick question.
Yeah.
Miško. What
It's a
about
quick question.
debugging? Is there anything specific we should know about it?
It's no different than debugging like in Next.js, which means you have to understand that some code runs on a server, some code runs on a client, and so you need to debug both sides. Debugging on a server is pretty straightforward. Let's say I just want to debug here, so I do debugger, and then I can just launch it here, and then it should, let's see, refresh. And why is it not? Yes, running. Oh, why is it a different? Why is it no? Why is the? Oh, because the other terminal is still running on the other port. Okay. Sorry. Let's kill the other terminal. Sorry. Let's kill this. And then let's restart the debugger way. And then this should cause, there we go. Now we're in the debugger and we can look at the count or whatever. So it's as simple as that, right? So we can step over, we can continue, right? So it's pretty straightforward to do that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? No? Great.
All right, let's actually build a demo. Let's follow the demo here. So the thing we would like to do is go talk to GitHub on a server. So let's create this route right here. So to create this route basically means that we go to the routes folder, we say new file, and we do GitHub index.tsx, right? So now we're creating a route for this particular thing. Let's create a component. It has to be a default component. And
can you show me the snippets you use? Q component to scaffold the
Q dash component, and the VS Code should automatically be configured to do this for you. So when you installed the CLI, it should have configured your VS Code to do that.
Yeah, because you were too fast.
Oh, sorry. Q component is how you generate stuff.
Okay.
So now we have a default component, hello Qwik. So if I go to GitHub /ABC, first I have to run the server, pm run dev. So if I go here, there you go. Here's your hello Qwik. So the first thing we would like to do is go and extract the part of the URL. So notice how the user is in brackets, right? That means that is a match all route, and so we want to extract this. So let's just do const location equals use location, and now we can say, instead of hello Qwik, we can say no, it's actually user, right? So it's a user location params dot user. That has to be imported. And so now it says, ABC, and if I go and change it to Hevery, it's Hevery maybe we format it a little bit. We do code.
Okay, so basically, use location is the API to grab stuff from the URL.
That's right. And I want you to, so Qwik has this idea of a unified execution model, meaning that you just write code and you write a single application and you don't really think about where is it executing, right? But some things need to execute at specific locations. So component dollar really means like, well, it will execute initially on a server, but then on a client, basically as needed, right? So the semantics of component dollar sign is that it will be whatever is convenient at the moment, but the framework kind of figures this out. But there are other times where we want to do stuff that is specific to the server, and so we always want to do things on the server or on a client. And so the first thing you might want to do is like, how do I fetch data? So data fetching is an important part of it. So let's fetch some data. So I am going to install sorry, let's make this font bigger. I'm going to install API ActoKit. And so let's do this. And ActoKit is just an API that gives you type information about GitHub URL. So we're going to use GitHub URL as a way of fetching the data. And so I apologize, but I'm going to just cheat here, and I'm going to just cut and paste this piece of code. And I'm going to explain to you what this piece of code does. So everybody has access to this, right? This particular thing. So that you can also cut and paste and cheat. Okay. Okay, so we did some imports. Those are not interesting. So this is how we get the specific type information. This is just how the ActoKit works. I'm not going to get into details, but it basically says, give me the type information for this service, blah, 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 blah. And so here we are going to fetch the data. So I'm going to explain the route loader in a second, but I just want to talk about fetching of the data, right? So this is a standard fetch API. We're going to say, hey, we are going to go to this URL on GitHub, and this portion right here is going to be the user that's in the URL, right? This params URL is the user. And so we get this, passed in the route loader. Again, I'll explain the route loader in a second. And in order to do the request, GitHub wants headers. And one of the headers it wants is a GitHub access token. And so what you need to do is go to GitHub and go to settings, go here, go to settings, go to the bottom, developer settings, and you create one of these personal tokens right here. So if I've already done that, so I am not going to go through the whole thing because, in the interest of time, you can go ahead and do the same thing as well. If you don't have an access token, it will still work, but then GitHub will throttle you. And basically, if you make too many requests, GitHub will say like, no, we're not going to respond anymore. Okay, so where do you put this access token? So there's a file called env. Why is it not? Oh, right. This is the file that's missing, and we have to put it back. Okay, I'm going to copy it. Copy.
You can copy paste from GitHub.
Oh, it's not on GitHub.
Oh, yes, sure.
Yeah, so let's fix this. Sorry. Copy .work / repo Qwik workshop .env star to here. Okay, so here's the file that it looks like something like this. And this explains basically all the tokens that we're going to need through the time. So right now we just need this one, the GitHub access token right here. And I'm actually going to go fix the repo because it's not in the repos. So that they can also copy it. GitHub workshop.
Qwik workshop.
Is it Qwik?
Qwik dash.
There we go. Okay, let's just quickly fix this. So dot.
I saw a dot env.
Is it there? Oh, it's already here. Okay, never mind. So it's already here. So this is your .n file. Okay, okay, okay. So you can just copy it from here and then fill in the value that is in this location. Sorry for the confusion. Okay.
So basically, we are creating an environment variable to grab the GitHub access token.
That's right. And this gives you instructions where to go and how to make it. Okay, so I already did this. I put it inside an end local. I am not going to open that file because these are private tokens, and then I'm going to have to rotate them, and I don't want to do that because I'm lazy. So we basically have this access token set up, right? So this fetch will just go and fetch the data from the server, and then we take the JSON, we process it, and then we cast it to this particular type that we have over here. Now let's talk about a route loader. So route loader is a code that needs to run eagerly when you navigate to a specific URL, and it's used for fetching data, or rather getting data for the rendering, right? So this route loader gives you a use method, and then the use method can be used inside of your component, and you know, you can then well, I'll show you what you can do with it in a second. So sorry, I haven't used it. Sorry, const what is this, repository? Repos, sure, equals, okay. So now we are fetching the data. Now here's the interesting bit. Notice when I hover over it, it knows the type. See the type in here? It correctly, the type information has correctly flow from the system. And I want to point this out, like if you're coming from other frameworks, the way they work is that you're not allowed to actually refer to whatever the equivalent is. So if you have Next.js, the equivalent way of doing this is get static props. And you're not allowed to call static props. Instead, static props are being passed to you. And because of that, the type information doesn't flow automatically. You manually have to cast your props into the correct type, and there is no guarantee that you do the correct cast. You could do the wrong thing, and you get the wrong information. Whereas here, the system just naturally knows that this is going to be. So the crazy thing is, what the dollar signs basically allow you to do is they allow you to code that could potentially be on the client is referring to code that will never make it to the client. And the dollar sign makes it okay. So every time you see a dollar sign, it's a potential place where things can be separated. And as a result, it's perfectly okay for the client code to refer to the server code, but you know that you will not pull in the server code into the client, because pulling the server code in the client would be a problem, because like, for example, you're doing an import of Node.js or file system or who knows what else, private keys, etc. You don't want to have any of that stuff, right? And so this is, again, why we talk about unified execution model, because we can just put everything in the same location and the right stuff just happens. And it might be a little scary, but I promise you, once you use it for a while, you're going to absolutely love it. The fact that you don't have to think what's server, what's client, and the right stuff just automatically happens. It's really, really enjoyable. So what we've done here is we just got a list of repositories, right? So now we have a list of repositories, and we probably want to render them. So we do a UL and a repos map, yeah, and it's going to be li. And let's get the correct set of brackets. And
You have the snippet in
yeah, I know,
copy-paste.
but I wanted
Okay, okay.
repo dot. Okay, why is it? Oh, repos dot value, because Copilot. Okay, here we go. So the all correct information flows through, and so that would be a full name here. And
Full name.
Yes, I got it. And then here we want to have the key, because you need that, and you need the repo dash ID. Okay, here we go. So now, if we go to our code, oh yeah, it's a no GitHub URL. What's going on here? Did I forget to run the server again? Oh yeah, I have to run the server. Here we go. Here's a list of URLs, and we can even get more of them. Okay, here we go. So now we have a list of URLs that came from the server, right? And I want to point out a little interesting thing that happens here. So in this particular case, if you look at what state got serialized, it is absolutely nothing. In Next.js, for example, in other frameworks, when you do the equivalent of get server props, that state must be serialized and sent to the client. And Next.js does it in next_data. And the reason why it must be done is because on the client, the component has to rerun, right? It has to hydrate, right? And as part of the hydration, the component has to rerun. And because those values were passed in as props, the component needs those values so that it can rerun. And so you have to serialize that information. Now, in case of Qwik, there is no hydration, so the component never reruns, and as a result, you don't need to send the data. So in this particular situation, no data actually got sent to the client. Really, it's just HTML and nothing else. And again, as a developer, I didn't have to like think about this. Like, it's just naturally how the system works.
What about multiple requests? If I need to do 2 requests into different endpoints, can I do it?
Yes. So the other nice thing is that you can have as many of these route loaders per route as you want. And then when you want to get a hold of it, it doesn't have to be a root component. It could be a component somewhere deep down into your hierarchy tree, and it doesn't even have to be the same file. This could be somewhere, for example, a common thing to do is to say, to create a route loader for the current user, which looks at the cookie and determines who the user is, right? And then you can just use the user anywhere you want in a system. You don't have to directly get it through props or do prop drilling or anything like that. So this is another reason why they use the route loader is just a nicer way of doing it. Questions? Some of you look perplexed. All right. What do we want to do? I think that we wanted to do some styling, right? Let's see. We got the code. Okay. So let's add styling, and let's grab this code. My stylings are legendary bad. So, okay, let's create a CSS. Let's paste some styling in here. And so we are going to have to get a hold of the styling. So we do import CSS from index CSS. Now, this is a Vite thing. If you just import like this, what Vite will do is it will include the style tag inside of the response. That's not what we want. Instead, we want to process it ourselves. So say inline means give me the value of the CSS. And once we have the value of the CSS, we can do this. And we're basically loading the CSS on as-needed basis and also scoping it. And so we have to do class card list, and here class card item. And so now we have it nice cards like this. And notice that if you zoom into it, it's scoped because the style associated with this component is right here. Is you see how the stuff got rewritten so that it's scoped, so that it's not, you can be sure that you don't modify somebody else's styling in some other component. Now, the reason why it's done this way is because when it first renders, so here, let's call, here, let me show you. Okay. Let me show you something else, and then we're going to come back to why it's done this way. Use signal. Okay, and then in here we do an input. Yeah, we can take a break in a second. Okay, value. Oh no. Find time value. And then in here, let's do console.log. No, you're not helping. Filter. Okay. So I wanted to show you what happens differently here. So when the component first runs on a server, it will have to go and download the CSS on a server. So in the server, it inlines it. And I've intentionally created an input here and a console log just to kind of show you that I can type here. And when I do that, it's rerunning, which means the code is rerunning in here. Let's refresh this. And that's our thing. Where is the component? One of these is components. User component response. Yeah, this is our component right here. So when it's rerunning, notice the component had to get downloaded, but it already knew that the CSS was downloaded on a server. So what you're going to see is none of these files here represent CSS. So you don't double download the CSS. And this is a common problem with things like emotion, is that if you rerun the component, you're essentially bringing down all the CSS with it. And so by doing it this way, what we're basically saying is the downloading of the CSS is just like downloading any component. Only do it when it's strictly necessary. And in the case of an SSR, the styling was already inlined at the time of SSR. Therefore, if the component reruns on a client, there is no need to bring the styling with you again, because you already have it, right? But if this was a new render, you might have to bring it as well. I'm not sure that made sense. Hopefully it did. Basically, it's done this way, so you don't have to download the CSS unless it's necessary.
We have a question from home,
Yes.
and our friend Pier Daniele Hritara is asking, can you make an example of use of a state management library like Redux would be?
You can definitely use something like Redux. I think Redux, like some people love Redux, some people are not big fans. How many people are fans of Redux here? Okay, how many people think Redux is unnecessary? So it's about an even split, right? And I'm going to ask a different question. How many people have used MobX?
Not yet.
And absolutely love it, and you think MobX is way better than Redux? You don't know about that yet, right? Kind of. So you think that MobX is actually better than Redux, right?
It depends how you use it.
So first of all, you can certainly use a Redux pattern with Qwik. Nothing prevents you from doing that. But MobX and signals are essentially the same thing. And what you're going to find out from people who've used MobX is that they absolutely love it, and they don't think that they need Redux at all. And so I'm going to say, like, our experience is telling us that with signals, you don't really need Redux patterns. But again, nothing stops you from implementing Redux on top of Qwik.
We have another question. This one is from me, not from home. What about developer tooling? Is there anything already out there that can help
Not yet.
us?
And this is another place where maybe the community can help out.
Okay.
Yeah, so there
We'll
will be
build
some... It'd be nice to have nice developer tooling. It is probably something that would come later, but it's not yet available. I know.
That's great. What about testability of the code we're seeing right now?
We have V-test. You can have Playwright, end-to-end test, etc. So all of the standard testing tricks that you're familiar with will work here just as fine. Actually, one of the things one of the goals of our code base is so that the code runs even if you don't run it through the optimizer. So all these $ work in such a way that even if the optimizer is not present, you can't lazy load code and you can't do all this magic, but the code still runs, which means that inside of your testing framework, you can just run the code straight up. You don't have to do any kind of transformation to it.
So at some point, you said that how state is managed inside Qwik magically happens consistently.
Yes.
So that it doesn't have any eventuality on itself, like React would in this case. So do you feel this would make for a better framework instead of React, which has this kind of eventual problem testability-wise? Like, is it easier to test it since it's more consistent in the state answer?
I don't necessarily think it makes it easier. I think it's about the same. I think it's a separate thing.
Okay. Any other questions before we proceed? Yes.
Yeah. So what if you have like some global state that you want to reuse in your app? Would something like a state management solution kind of simple like Valtio, Atom, or Zustand would work well with Qwik?
I'm not familiar with these things.
It's like a proxy that you change and...
So you get proxies out of the box with signals, right? Like that's kind of what they do out of the box. So let's talk about global state for a second. So there's two ways to think about a global state. One is that it's actually global. And in Qwik, I'm going to tell you this is a really bad idea because Qwik runs on a server. and therefore a global state would be global across all requests. So nothing prevents you from doing it. You can certainly have it. It's a really bad idea because all of a sudden, basically, if you have two concurrent users coming in, right, they get to see the same state, and it's probably not what you intended, right? So what you really want is you want global towards request, not like global towards virtual machine. And the way to do it in Qwik is you just put the state somewhere super high in the hierarchy. So maybe in the topmost component, you create a state, and then you use something like context to get the state into all the different parts of the system, right? And in other systems like React, by putting the state super high, it means that you're going to re-render everything below you. But that's not the case in Qwik. So the fact that you declare state somewhere has more to do with how the state is serialized than implications about which components run. So which components run is always comes down to, did the component use the state? If the answer is no, then that component will never rerun on the client, right? So the fact that you put state at the root component and then you passed it to everybody so it acts as a global state will not cause any unnecessary re-rendering. So you don't get penalized for that, and therefore our answer to that question is basically just put the state at the root component or somewhere close to the root so that everybody can use it, and then you have a choice. You can either prop drill it or use the context to make sure everybody can get a hold of it. If it's something that everybody needs, probably context is a better way of doing it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before we move on? And I guess then we can take us.
Yeah, I think we're almost done with this lesson. So let me just double check that I covered everything, and then we can take a break. We didn't do like filtering. Should we do filtering now or should we do it later? Later? Okay, let's do it later. So I think we have, yeah, it's a good place to break. So let's do that. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, how much?
10 minutes, yeah.
10 minutes?
Sounds good. Yeah.
So that basically means 11:30. We're coming back.
We have one last question, then everyone's free to take a coffee. Our friend Pier Daniele is asking, instead of using a global state management library, what design pattern do you suggest to grant communications between hundreds of component Qwik app? I guess the context answer would be correct?
Yeah, so you would create a state somewhere close to root, right? And then you would pass that state to all the components, let's say through context. And then anybody can write into this state, right? Or maybe you create multiple states so that you can kind of judge who gets to write to what. And then only the components that actually read from the state would then be re-rendered.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for your patience. Coffee is waiting for you, so go grab one. And see you back here in 10? Yeah? Fair? 10 minutes. Thank you.
Considered early. Mexico, yeah, is like that. The Mexican Standard Time.
Yes.
All right, should we get started? Hey, Giorgio, how long did the program run for?
Oh, I don't know.
For a while?
Oh,
No?
for a while.
Yeah,
Oh.
for loop and a while?
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
right. Okay, yeah, but why did the JavaScript developer quit?
Quit?
Yeah,
Uh,
because he didn't get a raise.
oh.
No.
Oh.
No? A raise, like
Yeah.
a raise like getting paid. Never mind. Okay. Never mind. Okay, let's go back over here. Where were we? Okay, so we have this. Okay, so let's make it. Oh, that should be a new line. H1. So as I type here, I would like to search the list in here, right? So let's do that. The way we do that is, first of all, we set up a input, right? Bind value. And this is just a shorthand for like listening to on input event. So it's kind of a convenient shorthand. Anyway, so we bind it to the filter. And now we have this list here, and we would like to filter it out. And so the way to do that is dot filter. And then we do repo. Let's see, does that look right? That looks right. And so now we can notice that now we can search, right? So the list of items that are shown here changes as I type in here in the list, right? So now we have kind of filtering. Now I want to show you that in order to do the filtering, the system now had to serialize the state. So if we go to Qwik.json, what you're going to see is that now the Qwik.json is much, much bigger because it serialized the state of the server. Let me show this to you again. Let me comment out the filter, right? Now that the filter is commented out, there's no way to change these, right? So even if I type here, nothing changes in the list. And because of that, if you go to the Qwik.json, you'll see that the amount of stuff that got serialized is very little. But now if I want to do a filter, basically I am creating a subscription on the filter here. And so now when I type, it has to re-render. And because it has to re-render, the amount of data that's serialized is now much bigger because it's coming from the server. Does that make sense? And I think that's kind of interesting that, again, like as a developer, you don't have to worry about it, but the right thing just kind of happens out of the box. So, you have questions? Yes.
We have a question.
Can you force it to have data on the client so you don't have this back and forth?
Sorry, there is no back and forth. Why would you think there's back and forth?
You say filtering is happening on the server?
The data loading is happening on an initial page load,
Okay.
but once the page is loaded, everything happens in the client.
Okay.
Right? So I can go and shut down the server at this point. I can kill the server, and you know, all the searching, etc., is happening here. Right? So it's all client-based. The server has now nothing to do with this. Okay. Other questions? Okay, so what we were able to do is to just filter it like this. But actually, the way to really do it is through something called use computed. Basically, you want to create a new value. So we have a list of data from the server, the repos, and we have a filter. And what we really want to create is filtered repos. And so you want to say use computed. And you really want to move this piece of code to here, filter.value, value, why are you not happy? Not filter, sorry, repos. Okay, so you do the filtering in here. And now that you have filtered repos, you can use it instead of regular repos. And the nice thing about that is that you can then maybe render it like this. You can say filtered repos dot value length of regular repos length, right? So you would have something like 80 out of 80, but if I type workshop, now it's showing out of 5 out of an 80. Etc. Again, all of that stuff is happening on the client. So what we're doing here is we're using use computed, which basically says, hey, I need to create a derived value from existing state. And so it creates a new value called filtered repos. And then you can use that value in different places in your UI, right? You can use it in here. You can use it to render just the filtered repos rather than all of the repos that you have in here. And so again, this component right here, it begins its life on a server, right? It does initial rendering in a server, etc. And then as you start interacting with it, the relevant pieces of code download to the client, and then the right stuff is happening in the client. You know, I forgot to mention that earlier, but I'm going to take a little detour. So the reason why the system is called resumable is, do people know how virtual machines work? Have you played with virtual machines, some of you? Okay. So you can raise your hand. You don't have to be afraid. Okay. So you have a host machine, like a physical machine, right? Like, say you have a Mac. And so that's a host virtual machine. And inside of the host machine, you run special software, and you get a virtual machine inside of it. And let's say inside of the virtual machine, we start booting Linux, right? And so you open the window and you watch BIOS, then the kernel loads, then the login screen, then you type in username and password, then the desktop loads for you, and then inside of the desktop, you open up a word processor, and then you start composing, let's say, an email, right? At any point, you can save the virtual machine into a file. And then you can move that file into a different physical machine. Maybe you give it to your friend, and they can open the file on their machine, and it literally opens with everything cursor blinking, ready for the next character, right? What the friend doesn't have to do is watch the BIOS come up. It has the kernel to load, the login page to load, or any of that stuff. Like, they literally, or just open it up, and there it is, your email with the next character blinking, ready for the next character to be inputted, right? And this is what resumability is, right? And this is exactly how it works in the browser, in Qwik. So on the server, you execute the application on a server, you get it to a kind of rendered state, right, which you decide is good enough. And then you pause it. What pausing really means is that you serialize all the relevant data into the HTML. And then you send the HTML to the client, and then the client just continues where the server left off. It just resumes the execution of the application, right? It doesn't have to rerun everything from the beginning. And so that's kind of the magical part of Qwik, is that Qwik can do that trick, that the application runs on a server, you pause it, and then you can continue running it on a client. Make sense? Okay. We should go with our lessons. Okay, so let's see. We declared a route. I showed you route loader. I showed you the styles, environment variable, etc. Okay, so I think this is covered. Okay, so let me show you integrations. Let's integrate auth.js. So step one is we need to run this piece of code. Okay. So this shows you how we do integration. So when you run this, notice you have this nice menu, and it's saying, hey, what do you want to add it to? And you can see that all the different adapters that we out of the box support. And so in this case, we are going to add the authentication, the auth.js part. So let's add that.
I have a question.
Yes.
If I would like to contribute on Qwik, add an integration is the best possible way to do it?
Yeah, integration is an excellent place to start, right? Because you're really helping others to make it easier to use Qwik with some other existing technology. So yeah, that's an excellent point. Love it.
Okay.
Okay, so install this, and so what's the next step? Okay, the next step is, for some reason, auth.js is not a proper bundle. I don't know why. And so there's this little hack to tell Vite to not try to rebundle it. So that's what this, hopefully this is going to go away as somebody fixes the packaging format. But that's a Vite thing, it's not a Qwik thing. So we have to do that hack. And then we have to go and set up the environment variable. So I've already talked about it. So you need to have these four things. You can follow the instructions on how to do that. Again, I've already done it. In interest of time, I'm going to save it. We're going to skip that part. And so let's use it. Okay. So when you run the installation, one of the files that it created was this plugin auth file right here. And so what the plugin auth file is it's kind of like a top level route that runs all the time. And so Qwik also has middleware. So in this particular case, the server auth created the middleware on request, and this middleware does basically looking at cookies And so cookies can be used to store who you are. So that's what this bit does right here. And then it creates a loader for you. Use auth session. Remember how we created a loader in the previous lesson? So this loader doesn't have to be in the same file as where you use it, like you have to do it in other meta frameworks. Instead, it could be declared anywhere. So in this particular case, the auth session is declared on a top level. That means that any part of the application can just say use auth session, and it will get the currently logged in user, which is really nice. And then we have two actions, the use auth sign in and sign out. And as you can imagine, this is what's used for signing in and signing out. So this is kind of done out of the box. And then we have the secrets. I think the way I've set up my thing is I prefixed it with the word private. I like to use the word private in front so it's clear like this is a private token and it should not get to the client. So I like to do this, private. Oh, come on. Okay. No. Come on, I can type. When people are watching you, typing is hard. Have you ever noticed that? Okay. So here we configure GitHub as a default configuration. And so let's go to a layout. So remember we created a bunch of these index files, right? This GitHub user. And there's also a layout TSX. And if you open a layout TSX, currently all it does is just write down a slot, but a slot is basically kind of like children in React. But there are reasons why we need to do it through slots. So let's create this div, and let's do it like that. And then maybe we do header, header, come on. And maybe here we say quick workshops, sure, and then we create a footer. Build with love by builder. Oh, yeah. Builder. Okay. So now what it does is that we automatically oh, the server's not running. npm run dev. Okay, so now what we have is that each page automatically gets a workshop on the top, and it gets a footer, which is built with love with builder.io. Okay, so that's basically what layout files do. And we're going to use this layout file in order to add authentication. So let's see how we can use it. Remember how the plugin created the use auth session? So we can just use that in here. So let's do that. So const user equals use auth session. And let's do a div, and then if user, then what do we do? User dot value dot oh, we need to import, sorry, import. Okay, so now it should be yes. No, if user value. If I have a user, let's see, what did you create for me? If I have a value, then we say what it is. Otherwise, we do a logout. Yeah, that seems reasonable. User value, but it's not name. It is user dot. Let's just do name here. Okay. So let's see. So we're not logged in. It's asking us to log in, right? But we're not going to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to create a button. Button login. Okay, so now it's showing us a login button. And so the thing we would like is we would like to execute this auth sign in. So let me show you how to do that. So const sign in equals, okay, import. Okay, so now we have a sign in. So we have to wrap it inside of a form. So you can, for those, have anybody used a Remix? No Remix people? Okay, so you know probably how actions work, but let me show you sign in. Actually, let's call it sign in action. And form. This has to be imported. Okay, So now we have a sign-in action, which comes from the plugin, right, from right here. And we have a button that can do login. So let me show you. See, here's your button. If you zoom in on this button, it's just a button that is inside of a form that will do a post to a special location where the action is running. You don't have to think about any of that stuff. You just kind of imported the action and used it, and the right stuff is happening. So because we configured everything else, if I hit the login button, look at that. We get a sign in. So now we can click on the button. It will want to authenticate me. Yes, there's a password somewhere. I don't know what it is. GitHub. Use Authenticator app. There we go. And so now we're signed in, and look at that. It knows who we are, and now it's a logout button. So let's see if we can do the same thing for logout. So in here, let's see, so it gives us our current name. Again, instead of a logout, I want to have a form, and there's a button that says logout, and the action will have to be sign out. And so we will do the same exact thing, except it will be sign out, auth sign out, like this. And so now clicking the logout button should sign me out. Goes back to login. Now I can sign back in. Hopefully I don't have to do, there we go, and I can sign back in, right? So we got authentication essentially going with Qwik, and it's pretty simple. You look like you're going to say something.
Yeah. Basically, we didn't mention that we can have multiple layouts for every route.
Yes.
And then we didn't mention that under the hood, the framework is going to call the on request in a specific way.
Mm-hmm.
In the middleware, we have a way, a flow, basically. So you can maybe mention that.
Yeah, so you can have middleware. People know what middleware is and endpoints. Okay, so the order is that, you know, when you navigate to a particular page, so in this case it's GitHub Hevery, right? What that really is doing is that it's activating a specific route, index.tsx, and then you walk up and you see if you find any layout.tsx, and if you find layout.tsx, you eventually end up also with anything that's called plugin at. And so that creates a sequence of files, and then inside of those files you can have on request or you can have route loaders, and so all of those get activated as part of that navigation. So what the on request is doing is it's looking at the cookie that was saved, and because of the cookie, it knows how to populate the cookie information, which then is available to you inside of the use auth session. So instead of talking to the cookie, you just directly, you know, use auth and you get what you want. Does that cover it?
Yeah, but in the function, you grab the variable in some weird way. Let me say in the layout.
In the layout, what did I do weird?
No, in the plugin. Sorry, plugin.
Oh, in the plugin. Okay, what's weird here?
At line 7, env.get.
Yeah, so that's because it's on a server, you have access to environment, which basically allows you to read environment properties, right? And this only is available on a server, obviously. And so private secrets like auth is the way to get a hold of that, right? And because of the semantics of what's in here, you know that that's a server-only piece of code. As a matter of fact, if it wouldn't be a server-only piece of code, you wouldn't be able to get a hold of the environment variables. So
if I use import.env. Blah, 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 what's the problem?
So if you use import.env, that would still work, but now the problem is that the beat will inline that private key into the source code. And so depending on how your source maps are configured, you could leak the private key to the client through source maps. So for getting private keys, we should always use the env. For public keys, it is okay to use import.meta because that will get serialized into the source code, and therefore it's possible to get a hold of it.
Okay, thanks. Any other question? No.
Okay, let's see. The thing I wanted to do is, so there's a hello, and instead of a hello, I would like to do an image. Image source. Okay, so the image comes out of user.value. So if you have this part, then user.value, user.image. And notice, yes, why are you complaining? I know there's a couple of things wrong here, but, oh, because it's null, user, oh, because, oh, I see, because it should really be this. There we go, now, okay, now it's not red. So now we have an image of me, and so notice it's complaining that it's yellow and says, hey, for performance reasons, you really should set height, because otherwise you're gonna create a cumulative layout shift. And so in the future, we're gonna have a setup where you can just click on a button and it will automatically get fixed. In the meantime, it's telling you to give it height, and let's say height is 25, and width is also 25. And so now, where am I? There we go. We have me, and similarly, you could do layout.css, and you would probably want to say image is round, no, border radius 50%, and then you want to load it, import CSS from layout CSS inline, yep. No, use scoped styles, use style. Okay, so now we should be, okay, have a standard thing. Oh, maybe we want to put it, well, we can do that later. Anyway, so that's basically how you would do authentication, right? So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward to do it. Questions?
Do we already have some kind of components like image from Next.js, for example? Is there something like that?
Yes, and more fun stuff is coming. So first of all, if you go to integrations, it's going to talk about image optimization. So you already can use all of these things that are described over here. But we are actually working on a new cool thing where you will be able to just import the image. That's the right. Okay, you'll be able to import the image right here. Just say something like, oops. You'll say import my image from whatever me.jpg JSX like this, and then this will just be able to be used like that.
Oh, that's impressive.
And it will be fully optimized, etc. It's coming soon.
Any other questions? No? Good.
Let's see, did I did everything inside of this lesson? We did Vite, we got auth, environment route loader. We did the pass data between, yeah. But why do I need this? Because I don't know what the comment is about. Okay, so that kind of covers this lesson, and I think Giorgio now will be entertaining you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no?
Oh, yeah.
Do you, okay. Do you want to try to do this lesson?
Yeah, sure.
All right, how about you switch with me? No, you can have this and I'll do that. Take this chair.
Okay, but if you want, you can type for me.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
gonna type for you.
yeah,
Okay,
thanks. So basically now we implemented the authentication part, and then the next lesson is for define a specific route inside a folder. So let's create this file in this .tsx. So we are inside of GitHub user /repo. We create a component, default component, and then I think you can grab from the lesson all the component. So here you have all these.
So let's do it in chunks. Let's grab this folder first.
Okay, so we are creating a root loader, just like before. So root loader runs on the server and is going to grab parameters, so user and repo, because in our URL we have multiple information now because we are nesting the route. As you can see, we have GitHub/user and /repo. So we can grab the user and the repo from the URL. And then basically we are doing a fetch on the server with the user and the repo. And then we grab the response. We create a JSON and we return the data. So we are using with the user repository at line 24, we are grabbing the information, and then we can print all the information into the browser. So in the example, we create an H1 with the repository. Okay. So I don't know if you want to just copy paste.
You don't like me, watch me type.
Uh,
I think when you, sorry, where is mine? Where is the stand?
it's really heavy.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's heavy. Thought you were kidding. All right. So I think you can cut and paste, but I think people follow along better if they watch you build it. So what do we do here? We do repo dot.
So we have this information, we have the repo, and then we can show what we can show.
What is it?
Repository, use repository, and this one, value.name. Yeah, so let's hit this root. So we need to pass the user and then the repo.
Right, but I wanted to see, isn't there a user? Value.
A value description. We have a name, we have a description.
Oh no, it's owner, that's what it is. Owner
Okay.
dot name. And slash. Value dot name. There we go.
This is the answer collected by GitHub API.
Yeah,
Yes,
GitHub
yes.
API. So we are fetching information from GitHub API. We get a user and we get the repo. So great. So now we have multiple information like description and the name.
Okay.
Okay, so basically on the server we are fetching data and we are printing the information out. Okay, so let's go on with the lesson. Okay, user location.
Oh, so I got it from here, but I could have done it use location, sure.
Okay, so we use the API use location to grab the parameter from the URL as we saw before. So we can add an anchor tag, or maybe we can add the code. Okay.
Or you want to make this clickable? Yes.
Yeah. In the example, you create an anchor to jump into the GitHub/user to get all the repo. So we basically have a back button.
Is this using common browser compatibility for the linking between routes?
Yes.
So there is no prevent default weird things?
No, but we can talk about that. So here's your link, right? So now if you look at this link, it is just an ahref, right? So nothing really special. And so by clicking it, you're doing a full page reload to get to this location. But what we can do,
You have a special component called link that is doing some magic.
okay, and now notice the same AHREF, but there is prevent default click. So now it becomes a client-side route instead of a server-side route. So the choice of whether you want to do client-side navigation or server-side navigation is done by like, well, whether you do a link or a. So there is no, it's not like this is a server-side, an SPA framework or an MPA framework, and you have to make a choice and you're stuck with it. Like it's like, hey, well, whatever, you can do one for one and the other for the other. Yeah, they're both of them. It's very SEO friendly, right?
And what about the use task? If I have a use task and I'm doing a rendering with a link, use task run in the browser instead of if you.
Oh yeah, yes.
But it's something that the developer maybe want to know, but he doesn't really care about it because the framework do all this stuff for him.
That's right.
Okay, so I think for
oh
this.
no, we gotta make this link. Look, I can't click on this.
Okay.
Index.
So, okay. You're creating an href with the full name of the repo.
And right now this is not strongly typed, but it will be strongly typed later. Actually, we can just do full name here.
Okay, so we can back and forth.
So now this is a link, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Great. So then we can move on and.
What was the road up? Go back. I think we skipped something. Said something about.
Use location. So
oh, so you sorry. I thought it's okay. Never mind. I'm confused. You're good.
Okay. So the next lesson is to add Supabase into our application. So for adding Supabase into Qwik, we need to install some dependency.
Right. So what we would like to do is basically allow you to favorite this particular page, and so that information has to be stored somewhere, right? And so it would have to be stored in Supabase. So what is? I have to go install something, right?
Yeah. So you can go copy paste from the lesson.
Yeah, let me go from the lesson. So that's lesson.
Lesson 4. Okay, so here we are installing Supabase.js, Supabase out helpers Qwik. Okay, then you need to set up a Supabase account, of course, and create a new project. You already done.
Yes.
Right?
So let's see. I've already done that, but let's just start from the beginning so that we don't lose people. So let's create a is favorite. Let's just comment this on return. Okay, so let's just create favorite, and it's just a random number. And so now we're going to be sometimes true and sometimes false when we request this, right? And so we're going to grab this data in the component, and then we're going to use this information to render a button.
Mm-hmm.
And this button will look at whether we are favorite and render fun stuff. Let's see. I'm just going to copy this from, where is it?
Yeah, there.
Here. So we're either going to render a full star or an empty star, right? So now if we go to the page here, and I refresh this, I don't have the server running. If you refresh this, notice now it's solid, right? And if I keep refreshing, it's sometimes solid, sometimes not, right? So completely random in it. But really, we want to connect this to a database. So let's do that. Let's connect it to a database. So step one is we grab this information.
Okay, so in the root loader, we are doing something. So we are grabbing the session.
Right. So remember how there is the on the on request here. So this on request puts a session so that the other middleware can use it. So a route loader is a type of middleware, and so we can get a hold of this shared map, and from there we can get a session and extract the email address, right? So now we have what the email address is, and let's just comment this out and return math.random. Okay. So, well, this is a set. Wait, where is it? No, this is supposed to be a get favorite, not set favorite. I'm looking down the wrong thing. Well, okay, I can just ignore it. Okay, so here's our super base. We're going to create it, and then we can use the super base to run a query. I think it's data/error equals await. I'm gonna have to cheat, sorry. So we're basically saying from Superbase, look at the favorites and then select everything. So just, no, normally you would have to create a Superbase account, but I've already went through this. So let me sign in. GitHub. Come on, Superbase, do your thing. Okay. So in here, there's a workshop. And database. And here's my favorite. So in the favorite table, because I've already done other workshops, I already have a whole bunch of favorited items. Let me zoom in this a little more. No. Okay, so now you can see that we have a email, user, and a repo, right? So if we query the database and one of these items is present, we should have a star over there, right? So Hevery Qwik, right, as you can see over here, is already present here. Oh, it's interesting, it's there twice. Oh, well. Don't know why it's there twice. How do I delete this? Is there a delete button somewhere? Oh, delete row, here we go. Okay, so let's go back here. So now we're just saying like, hey, talking to Superbase, give me a list, favorites, select everything, where the email, user, and repo is in here. And then if we have a error, throw error. Otherwise, what we want to return is favorite, right? We just want to know if the favorite length is greater than 0, right? So if it's greater than 0, then we know that there's a row in a database, right? And so we say true, otherwise we say false. So if I go back to my UI, you can see that this is favorited, right? This Hevery Qwik is favorited, but if I go to Qwik-workshop, that's not favorited, right? So like whether or not this is selected really depends on which place I know, and so now I can see whether I have a favorited item or not. So the next thing to do would be to, when I click on this button, I would like to, turn on and off the favorites, right? So let's do that. So first, you have to create a form, as I said earlier. You don't have to do it this way, but this is kind of a nice way to do it in terms of, it's very, it works even if JavaScript is not present. So set favorite action. So where does this come from? Well, let's make a favorite action. Export const use set favorite action. well, we would like to know what the value is, right? So is favorite. So where do we get is favorite from? Well, we get it as a first argument. And so in this particular case, we're going to create a hidden is favorite. Look at that. It's pretty good. Is value. Right, so is favorite here, which came from the super base, right? What we want to do is we want to do the exact opposite. So if it's favorited, we don't want to favorite it. Otherwise, we do, right? So we do something like this, import. Oh, it's curly, it's not.
Curly braces.
Yes. Oh, we forgot to get it. Copilot sometimes is like doing extra stuff. Okay. So we have a form that has a button. If the form gets submitted, it's submitted into this action, which is right over here, and all it does is prints the console log, right? So let's go in here. So if I click this button, and what you see here is that it says set favorite action, and in this case, the is favorite is an empty string. So it's what we really want to do is let's just do like this, and because it's an empty string, we're saying we want to make it false. So it's currently true. We want to make it false, right? But if you look at it, if you hover over the is favorite, note it just says a JSON value. Basically, it has no idea what this is. And so because it's fundamentally a post, right, if I hit this button, if I go to the network tab, what you see that this is a post, right? And this is the header, sorry, payload. And so is favorite was just an empty string here, right? And because it's a post, anybody can post to our site with who knows what data. So we really want to protect ourselves. So we can use Zod. And in Zod, we can say is favorite. And it's not here, it's Z. We got to import this. Okay. So we can say that, hey, what we're expecting here is a Boolean. And so now if I hover over is favorite, notice that it now knows that it's not a generic anything, it's specifically a Boolean. So let's try this. So if you click here, what we get is an error, because Zod is basically saying like, hey, I really wanted a Boolean, but instead you gave me a string, because that's how forms work, right? Forms have to be strings. And so what you need to do is you need to say course this to a Boolean. So you say like, yeah, I know you're gonna get a string, just convert it. And so now if I refresh this and I hit the button, notice it says false, right? So it's telling me that, hey, I would like it to be false. So we have an action. Basically, we have code that we can trigger through a button, and obviously it has to be on a server because it has to talk to the superbase. And so let's see what we have to do to make it work. So instead of console log, we're again going to have to get a hold of the superbase. And again, you can put this in a common code and refactor it and all that stuff, right? I'm not going to go through it. Okay, so we have this, and so now we have to basically make a choice. We can say if I'm logged in, so if I have email, then I can run this code, and also if is favorited, then I will run some code. Otherwise, some other code gets run. Okay, so what should run when we are favorited? I'm gonna cheat, sorry. Hopefully you can follow along, but I'm just cheating here. So if it's favorited, if I want it to be favorited, right? Actually, this code is the wrong code. Delete. Okay, so if I don't want to be favorited, I'm just gonna go to the database and I'm gonna ask it to delete all the records where the specific email user and the repo is found, right? So that's how I'm gonna remove it. And if I do want to be favorited, then I'm gonna run this code, which says, go to the favorite database and do an upsert. Upsert means like, try to update whatever's in there already, otherwise do an insert. So it's either an update or an insert, depending on what you find in the database. But the end result of this is that after this executes, there should be this information in there. And sorry, this is the second argument. right? So again, this action basically uses the session. So the session was placed inside a shared thing by the on-request middleware of the authentication. So now we know what email we are. If we get the user and repo from the URL, right? Because we know the user and repo what it is. We create the client, and now we can go ahead and if we are asking to be favorited, then we do an insert into the database. Otherwise, we delete it from the database. So let's see if this works. So now you can see that we can start it and unstart it in the database, right? And so really what's happening here is that after the action runs, the loader reruns, which then shows you the correct update. So the mental model is you first do an actions that maybe modify some database stuff, and then subsequently in the loaders, they rerun and they fetch the latest data for the output. And the nice thing is that this works both with, if the JavaScript's enabled, then clicking on this, just creates a special post. But if we disable JavaScript, this will still continue working because it's just a form post that is happening on it. And so we do instead of a fetch in here now the request is, when we're posting it, we're going to a specific URL, and the response over there is a full rendering of the whatever it should be on the UI. And so again, it's a nice way to get both server and to get both JavaScript and non-JavaScript behavior. Even though nobody's really running sites without JavaScript, what it really shows is what the search engine gets to see. And that's really nice, I think. Questions? Yes, somebody over there has a question in the back.
We have a question from online. So Pier Daniele Cretara asks, how can I protect a root from user authentication? For example, from Auth.js plugin. Is there a way to protect roots like Angular guards?
You know how to answer that.
Yeah, there is a protection for our roots, and we can basically throw redirection, or we can protect.
So the middleware is the answer.
Yeah, the middleware. Basically, when we hit a route, the code that we have on top of our file or in an external file is basically a middleware, and we pass through them before rendering the page, and we can redirect the user to different routes if the user is not authenticated. So we have this possibility.
So I'm actually doing it.
Okay. Great. So we are defining a root loader, on request, and then we can basically redirect. Okay, so we are grabbing the session. If we don't have email, we can redirect. We need to pass the error code 308. Okay.
So that's where you go.
Okay, so that's the explanation.
Yeah. So basically, when you submit the form with JavaScript disabled, it's just a page refresh. Okay. And another quick question: the session is a cookie, a JSON Web Token, something that you can configure. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have a mic. Sorry, I'm just gonna borrow this mic. Yes, that's exactly what it works, right? So the session is the way you communicate between components. Why is this red? Oh. Session is the way you communicate between components, between middleware. And so the plugin auth has an on request at which means it's as one of the first middleware that it runs. And inside of this middleware, it looks at cookies. And once it has the cookie and gets the user, then it puts the user in the shared map so that all the other middleware that are running afterwards can do something useful with it.
Okay, we have another question, and I think I can answer at it. Are there any component library like a material, bootstrap, chakra, and whatever on Qwik app? So we have our organization and Qwik, and it's called Qwikify. And instead of this organization, we are running a project, community project. It's called Qwik UI. And the goal of this design library is to be 100% accessible. So it's a great thing, I think. And we are basically building an headless CSS design library. And then on top of it, we have few integration with Tailwind, material, and whatever. So it's a community project. If you want to contribute, you are more than welcome. And then we are in secret, this is a secret project we are doing. It's a storefront UI. Storefront UI, now it's a library that is for React. It's for Vue, and we are adding the integration with Qwik, and is not ready for the production yet because we need to add the documentation, but soon will be.
It's not secret now that you told them.
Yeah. But if you want to contribute on it, you are more than welcome as well.
Do you have any loading state while you do action request? Like, for example, when you press
Yes.
the favorite, you know?
So
Can you show like a load?
if you are doing it, you know, if the JavaScript is enabled, it's everything's done on the client, and therefore you can do that. Off the top of my head, let's see. Do I know how to do this? So this action set favorite action dot is running, right? So you can do set favorite action dot is running. That's a good point. So now, here you go.
Are there any other questions? And I think we can print out also errors if our action throw errors or return errors.
Oh, okay. Why are you not happy? Why is this error? Oh, sorry. Copilot is probably so main value. Where's the error?
The error is, I think, in the form data.
No. I think it is a value. That's what it is.
Okay.
So it's value. So the value is both.
You can pass error on.
It's
inside,
both.
yeah.
Both of them is in there. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So if the action would have returned value, which it doesn't, then it would show up here, and the value could be the error state. So it would show up over here.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, I think we can go on.
Okay, let's see. Supercreate account, loader at action form. Okay, I want to actually just talk about a little bit. So does it make sense what the actions do and with their relationship to the loader? Like basically the way to think about it is loader is a way of getting data from the database to the component. And action is essentially a side effect, or rather getting data from the component back into the database, right? So the action is the thing that you do so that you can update the database. And because you've updated the database, all the loaders rerun so that you can correctly re-render the output. The way to think about it is that this is mimicking the way forms work, right? Without JavaScript. But of course, if the JavaScript is present, everything's happening on the client rather than doing a full page refresh. You can also call the actions explicitly. So here, let me just show you. Let me create another button that's outside of here. And so we can say on click. um, set form, set favorite action dot submit, and here you would say is favorite is basically this thing, right? Oops. Oh yeah, because I have to do a fat arrow. Oh wow, I didn't realize that the thing flows over here. That's amazing. Because there's Zod in here, right? And the Zod is saying that this is a Boolean. It's screaming at me saying like, hey, like you said it was a Boolean, it's not. Okay, so great. Even better. So now you have two buttons here, right? What is it? Server not running? Oh, server crashed. Okay, so now we have two buttons. This one is done through the form, and this is only going to work if you have JavaScript enabled, right? So this is no form submission; it's purely programmatic. So you can really use both. Advantages, disadvantages. You decide which one you like better. And I think that's it. All right. Advanced concepts?
Yep.
Is it break time or should we keep going? You guys want a break? Yes? Okay, I think they're tired. 10 minutes, okay.
Okay.
Hello. I'm starting to fall asleep.
Yeah, but now is the funny part.
The funny part?
The funny parts.
The funny parts.
Yeah.
You mean the fun parts?
What?
The fun parts or funny parts?
Both.
Okay.
Oh, we have a question.
Yes,
Great.
question.
From online.
So we have a question from our friend Benjamin Seblu, and he's asking, in Qwik City, is there something like Next.js's incremental static regeneration or on-demand revalidation? Because in their products, customers edit content that gets persisted in JSON, and every time they use this to kind of rebuild the route with the new content. Do we have something like that?
Do you know?
I have an answer, but I don't know if it's...
So you can have pages that some pages are SSG'd and some pages are OS SSR'd. You can certainly put the SSR into a cache that the edge workers provide, not quite as streamlined, so to speak, as ISR, but it is probably something that it can easily be added. But I think the fact that we can mix and match SSG and SSR already covers huge portion of the use case. Did you have something to add?
No, I think it's perfect.
Okay.
So we mentioned the fun and funny part of the workshop.
Oh, so I should also do some jokes.
No, for the jokes.
Oh, stand-up comedy. Miško, do stand-up comedy. Okay, let's do the advanced concepts. So this time, let's create a route in here. And as before, we create a component, default. And so if we navigate to the root component, it just says, hello, Qwik. And so we probably want to do a couple of things in here. How about we show the list of current repositories, right?
Yeah.
Current favorites, sorry, favorites. So the set of favorites. This is a different thing. Okay. Well, I'm just going to quickly show the set of favorites. It's not in the lesson specifically, but I think it's useful. Const use favorites, route loader, yep. And so the other thing we need is here. Here we go, this is what we need. Okay, and so we're going to return, let's see, we're going to get a currently, the route loader, let's import it. We're going to get a current email if we have it. There will be no user or repos.
Okay.
There is going to be create use Supabase client, and then we are just going to basically say, give me everything that you know for a particular email.
So you want to select all from the favorites?
Yes, so all favorites.
Okay.
And once we have this, then we can easily say const favorites, use favorites, and then in here we can just do UL favorites dot value dot map favorite map, sorry. It is li, and then in here you do favorite dot full name, favorite dot, sorry. Okay, we lost type information. How come? All right, because Supabase, I didn't configure the type information for Supabase, so it doesn't know what it is. So I'm going to help it out here. That's going to be array of user, which is a string, repo, which is a string, and
do you have
user.
Supabase open?
It's open. Oh, sorry, user twice. Email. Sorry, email.
Oh, email. Okay.
Okay, so now we can say favorite. Right, so we do repo slash favorite dot email, and what's the number of parentheses is missing? Let me see. Yes, and then in here we just do index and the key.
What is the problem? The key.
It's the key.
The key.
Okay. It's not strictly required, but it complains about it if you don't have it. So now we can see that you can see all of our.
Okay, so.
But it's not email, it's sorry, repo, and this is a user. Here we go. So now we have a list, and we probably want to make it into a link. href.
Okay, so we have a list of the repos that you favorites, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
GitHub slash. Okay, so we can go into any specific one, right?
Oh, AngularJS.
Yeah, never heard of that thing. Okay. So basically, this is pretty straightforward, right? I just kind of showed you how to do that. So let's now do the next part. And the next part is, wouldn't it be nice if we could just search across all of the, if we can find a specific username just by typing into it. So I'm going to create a new component called search. And let's do Q component. Let's do search. Oh yeah, const, sorry. And now we have it here. So let's put an HR in here, just kind of visually separate it. And so the search will have an input box, right? So it will probably say something like search input text. And so we want to bind the text, so const query, use signal, start with empty. And in here, we do bind value query. Okay, so now we have a query, and let's print it out. Okay, so all we have is a query, and in here I can type, for example, my name, and it prints it out, and so far pretty straightforward, right? Nothing really of interesting. Now, a thing we want to do with this query is send it to the server.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't probably want to do it on every single keystroke, so you want to have a debounce, right? So let's implement a debounce.
Yeah, because basically if we run a query every time we type something, we are bombing our server.
That's right. So it's helping but not helping, like the autopilot. Okay, so let's create a debounce query. What is it complaining about? Oh yes, never used. Okay, so let's create a task, and task is kind of like use effect, but there's enough differences that it would be confusing to call it the same thing. So the first difference is use task will execute on a server, because you have a unified execution model, right? So like you don't want to re-execute the same thing on a server and a client, and also the task needs to set up subscriptions. I'll show you that in a second. So the thing we want is we want to track and we want to clean up. So the way this works is, let's see. No, let me manually do it. So we want to set up a timer.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to do a set timeout. And so what we're going to do is we're going to copy the query. So we're going to say that debounced query is value.
Okay.
500. So we're going to do this 500 seconds later. So where do we get the value from? It's this, but no, not this. Track. So here we're just going to ask for query value, right? So we're going to read the current query value. The act of reading creates a subscription because we're inside of a track. And then we're going to create a timer ID, and then the cleanup function will just clear the timer ID, right? So step one is you read the current value. The act of reading sets up a subscription. The read is going to happen on a server because this code actually executes on a server. So on a server, we're going to discover the fact that this function needs to rerun whenever the value changes. And then in the client, the function reruns when you update the query value. And it sets out a timer where it copies the query value into debounce query. And it does it 500 milliseconds later. But if the function reruns before it had a chance to do this, it will clear the timer, right? And so the result of this is that you have a debouncer. So I can say Hevery, and as long as I'm typing, wait, I need to show the wrong thing here, debounce query, okay. So as long as I'm typing, no updates are happening. The moment I stop typing, the value shows up a few seconds later, right? So this is a standard way to kind of do a debounce, and this is an example of what a use task is good for.
So basically here we are saying, okay, please execute this piece of code every time that query.value change.
That's right. So we can try the console log debounce.
And
here.
every time you will run the code for me, you will call the cleanup.
That's right. Well, yes, the code, the cleanup happens right every time, but it depends whether or not the timer already went or not, right? And so if the timer already went, it already made the copy over here.
Yeah. So basically, if we type fast, we call a lot of cleanup.
That's right. So you can see the functions being rerunning here, but it only updates with a delay of 500 milliseconds here.
And what do we have in the network tab? We have some JavaScript.
Well, the network tab is standard thing, right? So you have JavaScript. So when you start typing, the code shows up. You know, what you get is the binding shows up, the framework shows up, and then the use task shows up, right?
So no components.
No component, right? Because the use task, remember, there's a $, which means this is a boundary, right? So every time you see a $, it is a potential place that you may or may not load this particular code.
Any question? Do I need Yeah.
You said some of that is done at the server.
Right. So notice I put a console log,
Mm-hmm.
and let me just clear the server. And if I refresh this, notice the first debounce executes on a server, and that is so that the server can discover the fact that this closure is dependent on query.value. Remember, there's a rule that says that whenever you read a signal, the enclosing function is what gets rerun, right? So the reason we want to run it on a server is that you want the system to learn the fact that, hey, I will need to rerun this again whenever the value changes, right? So if I get rid of, well, let me get rid of this. If I get rid of this, just print debounce, and then for whatever reason, I'm just going to hard code this, right, like this. So this this value basically gets skipped, right? So on a server, so now it definitely ran on a server, but me typing on the client doesn't make it run. It runs on the client. How come? Oh, because no. This should never execute. Why is it executing? What? Hello is true. Oh, sorry, or. Now it's not going to run. Right? So now it doesn't run on the client, right? Because when it ran on a server, this is truthy, therefore this doesn't execute, right? And the moment this doesn't execute, the system's like, well, you don't need to run this on a client, so it doesn't run on the client. So it's the act of reading the value that causes a subscription. And you might ask, why do I have to do a track? And that's because this function can be async, and you could put in like await here, whatever, something like this, right? And so the system still needs to be able to deal with the fact that there is an await. And signals rely on the fact that reading is synchronous. Sorry, signals rely on the fact that like when you do a read, it needs to know what function you have around you, right? But that is a global variable. And when you have async, where you basically are cleaning up the stack and then re-entering it from a different stack, right? And so when you do this, you lose the context, and so that doesn't work. And this is true of all signals implementations. It has nothing to do with Qwik. And so whenever you have an async, you need to have a track, which is kind of an explicit way of doing it.
Any question? I have one question.
Yes.
Do I need to care that use task run on the server instead of running on the client?
No,
as a developer?
No, I think, again, the point I'm trying to make here is that there's a unified execution model. Like, as a developer, you don't think of it as a server and a client. You just think of it as like, I'm just building this application, and I want the right things to do, and so I'm focusing on the behavior I want, not where the stuff is running.
So use task is really similar to use visible task we saw this morning.
Yes.
But use visible task happen into.
So use visible task. Yeah. So the visible task basically says only run when I become visible, and of course on server there's not visible, so it doesn't run on the server. But more importantly, use visible task also has the property that only gets executed if the component is visible, right? So it is code that eagerly executes on the client when the component becomes visible, whereas a task runs on a server, and on a server it learns whether or not it has to rerun it on the client based on the subscriptions, right? So there is a learning phase that you can think of it, the first execution as the system is learning about what this function requires as a set of inputs, and if those set of inputs change, then I know I have to rerun it. Make sense?
Yeah, I think for the first time when I saw use task, it's quite complicated to get the mental model, all the stuff. So I think they need to digest the.
Well, I think it's the first time you saw use effect, it was also complicated, right? So you're just used to a particular mental model that you've learned, and so now this is a slightly different mental model, and so you need to kind of figure out what the differences are. Once you kind of figure it out, it's kind of obvious. Like, oh, the thing just runs eagerly. Forget whether it's server or client. It doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. It just runs, and the act of running creates subscriptions, and whenever those subscriptions change, you can update things.
Is the track similar to the use effect array you need to pass?
Yeah, so it's similar to use effect array, but it's the use effect array as on the outside, right? Like the way you would do this in React, you would put it like here, and you would say query that value. But that means now that you have to re-execute. That's not spelled correctly. You have to re-execute this function every single time in order to figure out that the value changed or not, right? And so by changing the API slightly, you can take advantage of the fact that this value is a signal, and therefore now you don't have to re-execute, right? So in here, you would have to be re-executing the component because that's the closest thing that's here, whereas by moving it inside, now you're re-executing just the task rather than the whole component.
I see.
So you have to take into account basically the differences between signals and just set state.
So is this behaving like Redux selectors in a way? Kind of selecting exactly which part of the tree will get re-rendered based on the changes that the values are going to have?
For the online attendees, is more or less like Redux selectors. Is
That's
it?
a question, right?
Is it?
I don't know. So first of all, I don't know enough about it, but I don't think so, because first of all, the signals are the things that when you mutate a signal, it automatically knows what to go and re-render, right? So the signals give you the smart behavior of selecting just the relevant bits. This just creates a side effect of things, right? So this usually is meant to be used for things like, let me log something to the server synchronously or asynchronously or something of that sort.
So, like, I guess.
So I guess at some point the React people, don't know if it was Abramov or someone else, they decided that to shift completely from the traversal of the nodes that need to change in the tree, they wanted to kind of scrap everything and shadow insert stuff inside and then batch update the entire tree, right? Of the DOM.
Okay.
Is this still happening inside Qwik, or it becomes unnecessary at this point because we have kind of a way to select exactly without traversing the tree and without exchanging
I think it becomes
nodes?
unnecessary because signals by their very nature select specific thing that needs to update. So you just pass the value through and you don't have to think about like what's happening, right? The right stuff just happens automatically. That's kind of the nice thing about signals.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay, so we debounced it. What is the next thing we want to do? Next thing is we would probably like to talk to the server to fetch the data. The thing is that let's grab the relevant code. So we need this. Okay, I'm gonna simplify it a little bit. Okay, so the relevant code is this, but let me get rid of the server for a second. So somewhere we want to put this piece of code, right? Fetch users, talk to the GitHub service. That's the query we want to put in. We have to set the headers, and so we have to have the private access key, and parse the JSON and put the response. Okay, let's grab the response type. Okay, so somewhere we have to do fetch users. The thing is, the fetch users needs to be on a server because, again, private key, and so we don't want to send the private key to the client, right? And so we need to wrap the whole thing in server $. And the server $, basically pins this function to the server so that we know that it always runs on the server. Why is it not happy with me? Cannot find server. Yeah, I want you to import it. Server $, okay. So now we have basically fetch users, right? So we have a function, fetch users, that because it's wrapped in server $, has this property that it always will execute on a server. And this is basically doing the work that we need to do. So how could we use it? So whenever we update the task, we get the debounced value. And so we could, in here, go and talk to, cause the fetch to happen. But usually, you want to do it separately. So we have a separate thing called use resource. And use resource, in many ways, is similar to task, except use resource actually returns a value. So you say const response, let's say, users equals. And then in here, we can just say return fetch users, and we need to pass in the query. So, but of course, we need to track this. So we say track. Why are you unhappy? Semicolon what? Oh, sorry, it's supposed to be parentheses. Okay, so what we're saying is, hey, whenever this changes, go run it. But actually, let's do it slightly differently. Const query. Yep, and then if query. So if we typed something here, then we want to execute this. Otherwise, if we don't have query, we just return an empty array, right? And so what is this complaining about? Oh, we need to have async. Why is this not happy? Oh, because then it's query.
The param.
Notice how nice it is that like it's screaming at you that like, hey, you're doing something in here that's not supposed to be done. Anyway, so use resource basically says, I want to use computed was used to create a derived value from existing state. Use resource is for creating value, but not really from existing state, right? You're going externally, you're going outside of the system and getting some data that is not part of, that cannot be derived from existing state. And so use computed has to be synchronous, whereas use resource is really meant to be asynchronous. You go somewhere, get some data and come back, right? And so internally all we're doing is we're just calling the fetch users, right? So, and the fetch users does an RPC to the server, so we know that the fetch users is happening on a server. So we get users over here, and we can use that information to render it. So resource is a promise. And so we're going to say value is users, right? So this resource returns users.
So resource is a special component.
It's a special component. And so now here you can say onPending, and we can say loading, and then we can say onResolved. So we're going to get users here.
Some
I got derailed. Oh, yes. So we do li. No, unordered list. And here we do users. Map. User. Index. Li. User. Do I just get a user? And then here just do key index.
Login.
User.login. Okay, so now we have a search box, and into the search box we can type. So let's say Qwik, and you can see that there was a delay for debouncing, right? Then it said loading, and then you have a list of things that have Qwik inside of it. Let's actually turn it into a link. So we can do href. And that will become /GitHub. Okay, so now if I type in Qwik, I have links that I can go and click on and can get details, right? So you can get to this page. Now, funny enough, somebody really loves me because there's somebody who actually went to the trouble of creating a. I'm a nice guy. I don't know why anybody would do that, but. Yeah. So anyway, so now you have a list of repositories, and you can click here, right? Oops, I can click here, and you get a list of the repos that you have, etc. So that basically, we kind of showed you a couple of things here. We showed you debouncing, right? We showed you how to fetch external data, so you could do fetching here. In this particular case, we're actually doing an RPC to the server, so we showed you how to pin a function into a server-only location, and then on the server, we were able to go and do the fetch and get a hold of the private key, right? Because we don't want to have to get the private key on the server. We parsed the JSON, set back the response. And so this is kind of a more advanced version of it. Make sense? Yeah. Questions? Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So let's go look at the network tab. I think you want to see the fetch XHR. And so let's refresh. So if
if we can take a look at the network tab while we are doing the search. Yeah.
So here's, sorry. Oh, I see. You're just repeating.
Yeah.
So here it is. So here's a network tab. The thing you're interested in is a fetch, presumably, right? So you're interested in the fetch code, not the JavaScript loading. And then notice as I type, nothing is happening until I stop typing. And it's then when we have a query, right? We do I think this is a post. Yeah, it's a post to a URL where we're doing RPC. The payload of that RPC are two pieces. It is, right here, it is the string, right? And it also is a QRL of the system that we need to run on the other side, right? So we're telling the server to go and run the equivalent functions, and this function has the hash in here. And so then the server then responds with the data it got from the GitHub.
Okay, so this is kind of a custom protocol built inside
it is
Qwik.
custom protocol. You are not meant to, this is not an endpoint in like a generic endpoint. We can build an endpoint, it's super easy, and I can show you how to do that, but this is really meant for abstract away all the details, because one of the things you can send between clients and server are complicated things, like you can send a date object, which doesn't normally serialize inside a JSON. You can send cycles. Your graph could have cycles inside of it that doesn't serialize in JSON. And you can do weird things, like you can send other functions. You can even send promises across the boundary and other things, right? So the serialization protocol is really just custom and is not meant for you to use it in any other way than through a server $sign. But that begs a good question, like, hey, how about we make a new endpoint, right? So let's make an endpoint as well. So to make an endpoint, we could just, okay, so let's make a new endpoint. So let's create a export. Let's actually create a different, we can do it on the same one. Okay, here, let's do it. Export const on get request handler. And in here, let's just do JSON. I know we're gonna need a request. And we need a JSON. Okay. So if the request.headers get. Yes, so if we do a header request that includes application JSON, right? Then let's return a custom request. Why is this complaining? What? On get. What am I missing? Oh, we also have to exit the chain to do this as well. But why is it complaining? On get. Oh, because we're not returning the, sorry, there's no return. Okay, it's just JSON 200. Okay, so now we have basically for this URL. So if I go to /GitHub, right, I will see normal HTML. But if I go and fetch this JavaScript, how do I do this? If I go to a command line, let's see if I can do this, and I do curl. If I do this, obviously I'm going to get back HTML. But if I do -h, if I remember correctly, hold on, -h, accept, what is it? Accept, I think if you do this, accept colon, no, why are you not happy? Oh, sorry, not backtick. What am I doing? Here we go, right? You get a response. So what's interesting is, certainly you can do an endpoint, but what's interesting is that you can actually have the same URL be both HTML or an endpoint, depending on what header you happen to have, right? So it's pretty powerful because you can, or the other way to think about it is, the response, which is the HTML, is just a default endpoint that renders a component, right? And so you can get in the middle of the chain and be like, no. In this particular case, right, if it happens to be application JSON, I know how to handle it, and I'm going to do this. And so once you have this, you can, we could do, for example, we could say fetch users, and here we can say, sure, give me the query, request URL search params, no. What is it, search get, why is get not happy? Get doesn't exist, so it's search, yeah, request, this is URL, no, it's a string. Oh, it's a string. Okay, new URL. So now URL.search params.get. Okay, so now we can get the actual list. Let's see if I get this right. So in here, if I say question mark Q equals M Hevery, yes, why are you not happy? Oh. Oh, is that what's happening? And that crashes the server because, oh, I see. Because the fetch user has to be called with apply. Okay, hold on. This needs to be extracted. It needs the cookie. Where is it? Here it is. So we need to extract. Okay, so this is token. Const token equals this, and then this is just extract inner function, not inner. What am I doing here? What is token? Oh, token gets passed in, so it's query comma token. So query is string, token is string. Okay, and so now, why is this unhappy?
String or undefined.
Oh, I see, because this just has to be exclamation point. Okay. And so now we can reuse this function in our onGet. So it's this, and then we have to pass in a token. And that is from env. And so now we pass in the token and run the server. Okay, let's try this.
console log for the rescue.
Right, so the URL is correct, right? And we are correctly extracting the Q out of it. So why? Oh yes, thank you. Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
man.
Thank you. Ta-da! Here we go. Good job. Good job on awaiting the promise. Yes.
The first time you try to call to using CUR, you got an error instead of the HTML. I was curious to understand why. And on the other console, on the terminal, if you go a little bit, still a little bit.
Did no matches found this thing?
No. Up.
This?
Above. Cannot get.
Oh, because we the way the default endpoint works here is that it also wants accept header and it wants accept text HTML. So if you do the same exact URL, but it's instead of JSON, you say text HTML, I think it is. There you go. So now you have the HTML basically this is the HTML that the browser receives, right? And the error basically just says like, hey, there was no endpoint, nobody generated any data, so I'm giving up, kind of a thing, right? Yeah, so that's kind of the thing. So yeah, creating endpoints is super easy. Having middleware is also easy because that's just a on request that wraps the next request over. So you can do that, and you can see how you're not tied to any specific route. So you can have the same route serving both the HTML endpoint as well as the JSON endpoint. Did we cover everything, or is there more questions? Let's see.
Any other question? Yeah, one question.
So lately I have been using Cloudflare Pages functions, which has a similar setup for middlewares, and you have on get, on post, or on request, and also Hono, which is a framework for Cloudflare Pages, and also other runtimes like Dino and Bun. My question is, so could you distribute Qwik middlewares or Qwik plugin, which basically are a bunch of middlewares and maybe routes as a library basically for other Qwik applications to consume? Because for example, with Cloudflare Pages, you have plugins which you can reuse in other Cloudflare Pages functions applications. And these plugins, in fact, are just a bunch of middlewares and maybe routes if you have them, or maybe they add some things to the request context, basically.
Isn't what this is plugin add auth, right? Like here is a middleware.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That is running. So the only rule is that the middleware. So when you come to a particular route, right? Let's say we go to this route, right? Then you are activating everything on this route, right? So you're activating the repo, user, GitHub, right? So it goes down and says, okay, so you're activating this. That means you're also activating the layout, and you're activating the plugin, right? So those are the three files that activate. And then this framework just looks for on request or on get and in those files and runs them in that specific order, right? So as long as the function is exported in those locations, then that function runs on middleware. So if you npm install a third-party library, such as we did with the case of a server auth, all you have to do is re-export it as a function, and then that function just runs inside of the middleware, right? So in this particular case, not only are we exporting, but we're also configuring it, right? And so this is basically how third-party npm package can use this. But at the end of the day, it just has to be exported in one of those files. So a typical pattern is that you take your third-party library and then you re-export it in here so that it can get the hook in there. The other thing to point out is that when you're writing these middlewares, you are writing on top of Qwik City. And so wherever the Qwik city deploys, you automatically get those middleware in the deployment, right? So whether it's AWS or Cloudflare Pages or Netlify or Vercel, you have a consistent like API of like, I'm just gonna write my middleware in Qwik city, and I know that the adapter will correctly connect it to wherever it needs to be.
Okay.
Okay. Let's do the next lesson. And I think this is the last one, and also we're ending like around 2 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do the last one. So let me show you, at some point, you know, you're building your application, and you would like to, you know, the pages have to look good. And so at some point, the marketing has to create a landing page and, you know, home page for your page, et cetera, et cetera. And so at some point, you need a CMS system. And there are, the CMS systems are basically subdivided in like 2 categories, headless and hosted. I don't know who came up with the names. I didn't, but that's what the industry calls them. Hosted means that, well, it's hosted by somebody else, like Wix or WordPress, etc. Somebody else is doing hosting. Even WordPress, if you run your own WordPress, it's really not headless because, you know, the WordPress kind of owns the problem end to end. And there is a separate category called headless, and that's where I write my application in some technology, whether it's Angular, Qwik, React, whatever, and then I want to use CMS in there. And so we built our application in Qwik, and so let's integrate our CMS into it. So Builder makes a CMS. What's unique about Builder CMS is that it is visual, meaning that you can do drag and drop. There are many visual editors or page builders out there, but they all fall into the hosted category, meaning that, like, you know, it has to be hosted somewhere else. Like Wix, it's a good page builder, but it has to be hosted with Wix. Like if you are Target.com and you want to allow the marketing people to change your homepage, like you can't go to Wix, right? You can't embed Wix into your existing thing because like your page requires a login header and a footer that's with everybody, and you know basically render a shopping cart, and so you can't just like throw Wix in there. That doesn't work. So let me show you kind of how Builder does it with a headless CMS. So the first thing we need to do is we need to install it. So just like we installed all other things, why is it not the other? Cut and pasted it. Okay. So let's do add command, and so here these are all the integrations that we currently have. You know, over time we'll probably get a bigger list. So let's grab Builder.io, and it's telling you what it's about to do, and we say sounds good. Let's just do that. And then we wait for NPM to do his magic. Okay, so now we have this installed. And so at this point, you would go to Builder.io, and you go to the application, you set up private key, public key, all the fun things. And so I've already created a particular page over here that is served on a default URL. So what the integration did is it created a new route, index / right? Dot index. And what this route basically does is it's a catch-all route, meaning that if nobody else wants this particular route, it will go into this this handler, so to speak, right? And so this is what executes. And so what it does is it extracts the URL and sends it to Builder and says, hey, what should I render in this particular location? And so to make this thing work, what I'm going to do is I am going to take our default. So currently, if you go into our default route, so like this, server not running. If you go to our default route, it will just have our workshop, right? Because here's our hi, etc. This is coming from this file right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this file. I'm going to say, nope, I don't want this file. And so this is relying on the fact that by deleting this file, now there is nobody at the root route. And so now this guy will kind of take over, right? It's be like, hey, nobody's claiming this route, so I'm going to take over the route. And by claiming the route, look at that. We have all of a sudden content on the page. And so where did this content come from? Well, that's this thing that was kind of set up earlier. And I'm just going to go and change the URL here to be a local host. And so this is our page, right? We control this part, the login part here. We control the footer, but the marketing can control the text in the middle. So for example, let's say that we want to change things around here. And let's say we want to add it, create columns. And sorry, I'm not a visual person, so I apologize. And so I think we can do layout and to take the image and put it in the columns. How does it work? Can I just add like this? Oh yeah, here we go. And then we take this image and put it in this column. And so, you know, maybe this is what you want to build. I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert here. But as a marketing person, like, you are free to do whatever you want. So for example, if I wanted to come here, whoa, what is this? Why is it so tiny? What? Why is it so tiny? Is it normal size? Oops. Okay. So if I wanted to, for example, make the visual CMS, I don't know, bold or different color, right? I get to control it. And so then all I have to do is hit publish. And again, think about this as a marketing person, right? And then you go to our page, and it takes a while for a little bit of time for the CMS to kind of propagate. Sorry, CDN to propagate. So give it, usually takes less than a minute, but it does take time. And voila, now our page was changed. So now you can have marketing people, or whoever is responsible for building landing pages or do A/B testing, etc. They can go in and improve your website. And so as a developer, what you have done is you've given them a box. So if you actually, let's go take this. Let's go on this browser because I have this extension installed. So this box basically shows you what is owned by the builder, right? So the marketing people can't change this. They can't mess with the login page, right? They can log in here if they want to. Come on, log in. Oh yeah, there is a bug. Log in. Okay, let's go back to here. Why is this zoomed out? Reset, okay. So now we're logged in. So notice if you go to our page and refresh it, it actually should show us as logged in. Why is, because, what? Localhost 5157, yes. Why is it not showing us as logged in? What? Oh, because it's the same URL, that's why. No? Why is the cookie not being sent? Okay, I don't know why. I would expect the cookie, right, because this is the same URL as I'm here. And so here I am logged in, so there should be a cookie in here. So this should also be getting the cookie, but it's not. So I don't know what's going on here. No, this is also HTTP because it's localhost. I'm copying it. I don't think you can have HTTPS locally. Anyway, I don't know. The point is, this code right here, the Qwik workshop, right, is owned by you as an engineer. And so I can go in and, oh, by the way, this is a cool thing. When you hit Alt, I think, you can just click on, okay, sorry, I did it too fast. When I hit Alt, everything becomes highlighted, and I can click on it, and it will take me directly to the source code where it is. So I can go here and update the text, put exclamation points, right? They show up here. But notice, they also show up in here, in the IDE. So as a developer, you own this piece of code, right? You own the header, the footer, and the marketing owns this piece of code, and you can do it concurrently. And the right stuff is just happening. So one of the things you could do is we can also have, because everything is together concurrently, we can have what I think is the coolest thing, which is we can have our custom components. So we can go to the render, we can go to custom components, and we can register a new custom component. But before I do that, I'm going to delete the old one. Hold on. GitHub. Okay, I'm going to delete that. So we go here, And this is setting up components in the system, and so we're just going to create a new one. And we're going to register a component which is search, and then it has a component which is not a search, it's a search, okay. And if I import this, it should import from the correct location, right? So the search component we built in the previous lesson, I am registering with Builder. And because I registered it with Builder, I can now go here and notice this search component is showing up. So now the marketing department can take existing components and maybe put them over here. And now, come on, why is it not scrolling? Now the search is showing here, and so I can go, oh, I won't let me type. Ugh. I can go here, and then when we go and navigate to a live page, notice the search is over here, and I can type here and get a list of people. So now you as an engineer can create custom components that the marketing department can go and drag into the application wherever they want, right? And so in this case, this is on the left-hand side. Maybe they decide like, actually, I would like this component to be centered. So they can center it, publish update, and give it a few seconds to propagate, and there we go, now it's centered. So now we have behavior that the non-technical creative person can use to augment the website. And at some point somebody, thank you. And one day, maybe I can become creative and make it look good, because this looks horrible. But I am not an expert on it. So let me just show you what a real website looks like. Yeah. So while we're getting the question, this is a landing page for Qwik. And this landing page is actually built using Builder, so that we can go and, where is the edit button? We can go and edit any of these things, right? So by clicking on edit, this will take us to the site, right? So the marketing department can just have this thing installed. This takes them to the correct website. And why is this? Okay, no, that's the wrong thing. The button I really wanted is not this button. It is page, homepage. This is the one I want. It's running on localhost. That's funny. That's what should look Qwik.builder.io render equals SDK. See if I got it right. I don't know what URL it is. Okay, that's okay. I'll just go to localhost. Anyways, you get to build basically the parts, right, in the editor, and that becomes available to them, so that you can build super complicated things. Again, I'm not a creative folks person, but like all of this, as you can see, all these blue boxes were built using Builder.io. Okay, questions?
When you create a custom component, can you also make them editable from the CMS, like labels or something similar?
Yeah. So let me close this down. So in here, we have an existing component. And you can make it pretty. You can give it custom labels and pictures and all that stuff. There's a My Fun component. And let's just drag the component here. And so this one is it just says hello world, but it actually has properties. So I can say hello Italy. Italy. No, that doesn't look right. Too many else? Yes, okay. So I can do this, right? And so if you go to the source code, you can just see that I took the My Fun component and I have just created an input, default value, etc. Now if I go to the My Fun component, it just says to do uppercase, as you can see over here, right? But maybe I want to, and it's also a counter. Oh, I see, okay. Maybe I want to do something else in here. Maybe I wanted to say, I don't know, hello. And so just by changing it, now it updates inside of the application. So it's all kind of synced in together into the output, right? So you can actually see what the creative people would see when they're building the website, and you can go and modify anything you want. So if you decide like, oh, I don't want it to have an uppercase, it becomes, it changes instantly. So it's a total nice environment for updating.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm seeing a few icons over there, but you never know. So I'm wondering, let's say we're a company with thousands, if not millions of, endpoints or data storages of some kind. We're already using a CMS of sort. And we would like to transition for some parts on Builder.io. Is that possible? Is it already?
Yeah, you can. We have many customers who actually use multiple CMSs. They can use a visual CMS and a classical CMSs as well. So you can definitely do that. They tend to discover that like everything that they can do in their classical, they can also do with Builder. So they tend to migrate that direction, but you can certainly run both of them concurrently. It's not a problem at all.
Nice. Any other questions? No? Okay. We have none on YouTube, as far as I saw last time. Let's see. No? Should be good. So I would argue that this was a marvelous and incredible workshop from our very nice and good guests, Miško and Giorgio. So I would say let's give a big round of applause for our guests. Thank you.
And I'm hoping that you were all entertained and that you saw stuff that is pretty cool and stuff that basically is not easily replicated in other things. My hope for Qwik is that it will push how we build websites, because the way we build websites today, it's not really scalable. Like there's too much JavaScript and they're slow. They don't have a good SEO scores and so on.
That's true. How many of you are going to try Qwik in their upcoming projects professionally or personally for personal projects?
Nice.
Good.
Nice. Yes.
Spread the word.
Spread the word. Spread
It's
the love.
important.
Yes. There are stickers somewhere, aren't there?
There are. They're spread around the whole place. Really.
Okay.
So
But as I said before, like I really love questions. I enjoy. So we're gonna call it a day. But feel free to come to me afterwards and ask whatever or chit chat. But yes.
I saw on the website that you have like a React framework integration. That you
Oh
can
my gosh,
use.
we haven't talked about React. Yes.
So I quickly took a look and saw that you can use React component inside your. But the question is, did they get transformed into Qwik?
No, they continue running in React. So you don't get any of the magical benefits with Qwik you would get in a React component. But you do get the value that you can reuse existing components, right? And you can reuse existing ecosystem as well. So if you have like material UI you want to use inside of a Qwik application, you can do that. Basically, you turn them into lazy hydrated islands, and they wake up. And I'm happy to do a demo. It's super easy to do, actually. Actually, let's do that.
thank you. Any other questions that came up in the room? Okay. Who doesn't like t-shirts? Good. I like that. No hand. So if you've seen me before, you know I like to throw t-shirts at people. That's kind of my kink. So we have very nice t-shirts from Builder.io, and so thank you for giving them out, and also thanks to Steve, which I've seen on LinkedIn. You guys are just releasing CSS in TS, thanks to Chakra UI. Creator, right? So I've just seen a demo on LinkedIn a little while before. That was interesting. So if you want a t-shirt, come by, say your name, state whether or not you loved Qwik. You got to do a big heart like this and take a selfie, and then you can have the free t-shirt at any point in time. So again, another applause for our good friends. And oh yeah,
right.
Oh great.
So somebody was asking about React over there, right? And so
Yeah.
here is. These are material UI components. This is a material UI slider, and you can see that they're basically hydrated lazily. Actually, let me show you the console. Let's refresh this. notice as I move over them, the React lazy hydrated, right? So if you look at the network tab, no JavaScript, and then it lazy hydrates as I move over it, and then it behaves and has the can even run show table. No, why is this not running? I don't know why this is broken. Oh, because I clicked. Sorry, I have to make this thing go away, and then no. Yes, here we go. So here's a table. So we can do basically all these parts, and you can mix and match components. I can go into more depth if people are curious, but yes, you can reuse your existing React components in Qwik, which is pretty cool.
Nice. Thank you.